order the December 12th, 2022 Genoa Township Zoning Commission meeting. Time is 7 o'clock. We're in the Genoa Township Hall. Agenda items for this evening: zoning case 2022-05 CRI out parcels, Turkey Hill, fourth meeting; zoning case 2022-07 Daniel Bino, first meeting; in the zoning resolution and comp plan potential amendment discussion, as well as 2023 meeting schedule changes. Staff present: Joe Schaefer, Director of Zoning Development; Paul Benson, Deputy Zoning Director; and Mr. Peter Griggs from Boschus, Johnson & Griggs. Mr. Schaefer, roll please.
Roll call. Mr. Bernhardt?
Present.
Mr. Carter? Here. Mr. Leff?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Here.
I'm going to note Mr. Sears is here as well.
Statement of policy: this meeting may be recorded. Such recordings are public record and may be posted online and could be subject to review in court. As is the adopted policy of the Zoning Commission, all applicants will be granted an opportunity to make their formal presentation. The audience may then be granted an opportunity to comment, followed by the applicant's response and questions from the commission. The chairperson may limit repetitive debate and reserves the following rights: to limit comment to items on the agenda, to limit public comment to 5 minutes per person, to restrict the number of times a member of the public is permitted to speak, and to enact any other reasonable ad hoc protocols or measures necessary to maintain a fair, safe, and orderly meeting. This policy was adopted by the Commission to provide for the respectful, constructive, and efficient discussion of business scheduled for consideration and to allow for proper due process as required by law. First item up for bid is the meeting minutes. Comments, questions, motion?
I'd move to approve the November 14th, 2022 minutes as presented, unless somebody has amendments.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Comments? Good? Roll, Mr. Schaefer.
Roll call. Mr. Bernhardt? Mr. Carter? Yes. Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welch? Yes. Mr. Leff?
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. Now call to order at 7:02 p.m. CRI Out Parcels LLC requesting approval of a final development plan amendment to amend signage, parking, and related site configurations on approximately 1.37 acres located at 7447 State Route 3, Westerville, Ohio 43082, a fueling center, convenience store, and car wash, currently zoned Planned Commercial District, PCD, also known as Turkey Hill, zoning case number 2022-05. This is a continued meeting from November the 14th of 2022. Anybody speaking on behalf of this, please rise. Anybody in the audience, raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Be seated. Following exhibits were updated. Exhibit D, the revised application and plans received November 21st of 2022. Exhibit E, staff technical review dated December 5th of 2022 for the December 12th meeting. Exhibit F, staff memo dated December 5, 2022 for December 12th, 2022. And Exhibit G, all public comment received between August 15th of 2022 and December 12th, 2022. Mr. Schaefer, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to speak as close into the microphone as I can this evening. We did receive some feedback from some members of the public that they're having trouble hearing us on the audio. So just a general reminder to all of us, myself included, to try to speak into the microphone as clearly as we can. Moving on with Turkey Hill, I'm going to try to keep this really brief since this is our third or fourth meeting on this. If you recall at the last meeting, there was just the applicant had presented a revised site layout to you. There were some items that needed to be cleaned up and a divergence that still was sort of hanging out there that needed to be documented. So got continued to this evening. We did receive the revised materials that has addressed most of the items that were laid out as still needing addressed at the last meeting. So I'm just going to bounce through here real quick. The one-way arrows painted are now shown adjacent to the parallel parking spaces on the eastern side of the site. The divergence related to the signage has been requested, as was discussed at the last meeting. If you recall, this is a divergence pertaining to the amount of freestanding signage on the site. And that request reads as a divergence to section 1804 regarding the total permitted sign area of non-exempt freestanding signage, which is required to be no more than 25 square feet. They're proposing a total area of non-exempt freestanding signage to equal 47.1 square feet approximately for 2 freestanding signs instead of 1. The applicant's justification, and this is paraphrased, is that the freestanding signage proposed on the site is for information purposes specific to the convenience store business. The price sign for the gas is critical to the functionality of the site, and the additional sign is for the car wash pricing. The sign is required to be freestanding to provide proximity to the cars queuing in line to read the sign. Staff also had noted during the previous hearing that this site does likely qualify for some of the signage bonuses that the code allows for, and that needs to be documented. The applicant did provide that information. There was just a couple things. I believe the 10% bonus they're claiming needs to be 5%. They measured the right-of-way width as the amount of frontage that the lot has on the right-of-way as opposed to the width of the right-of-way east to west from the Turkey Hill side over to like the Bob Evans side of the road. That's how that bonus is being accounted for. So that's just a minor cleanup item. Regardless, it really is almost moot because they're asking for a divergence to go above and beyond even what the bonuses would provide them anyway. And I think even 5%, 10%, I think you're talking about maybe 1 square foot difference when you do the calculation. So they need the divergence one way or the other, and the degree of difference between 5 and 10% is almost de minimis. So it's really just sort of a minor cleanup item at this point. We still are asking them to incorporate it in the materials just so it's documented that it existed and they technically did qualify, so we have that record to build upon going forward. So that said, with the and regarding the signage, technically speaking, we need proof that they qualify for the bonuses. Staff has no doubt that they do. I've measured the width of that right-of-way on the county GIS. If you go onto Google Street View, you can see there's a speed limit sign very close to this site that demonstrates that they qualify for the speed limit bonus that they're being claimed. So it's really just, I needed that documentation for them for the sake of the record, but I have no doubt that compliance or qualification is achieved. So at this point, I feel like the application is to the point, despite the minor cleanup things, that if the commission was ready to vote on it and just levy some conditions, that staff would be comfortable with it moving this forward this evening. And so the conditions I've noted are at the end of the memorandum. So they are, one, that if the development text be amended to A, make it clear that the digital portion of the ground sign be operated pursuant to the standards set forth in section 180410 of the resolution, including all subsections, which may subsequently be amended. Language pertaining to the former is included in the development text. However, staff prefers some additional clarification be provided for the sake of enforcement. And B, also amending the development text to correct the signage bonus provisions that I just spoke to. Also, staff is asking that the commission condition a deadline for the items that are outstanding to be addressed be completed prior to issuance of any zoning permits which still need to be obtained for any previously completed or yet to be permitted work, as well as prior to any issues of any zoning permits needed for any improvements authorized under this development plan amendment should it be approved this evening. So I don't want to belabor any of those points any more than I already have. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Mr. Long, welcome back. Good to you turn your mic on. There you go. Good to see you. Why don't you go ahead and tell us where we're at?
Sure. Thank you for your time tonight. That was a good synopsis from the last meeting. Just a reminder from 2 meetings ago, we kind of took in some feedback to revise the site plan accordingly. Feel we're in a good spot now, but otherwise, I mean, Joe did a thorough job of outlining where we are at, and I'm just here to happy to answer any questions you may have.
So
And we are accepting of
Points-
the conditions
those
proposed by staff.
conditions,
Yes,
you have no issues with us talking about those conditions?
that's correct.
Okay. Anything else to present?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Just answer questions at this point.
Public comment? Going once, going twice, sold? Okay. Board?
I don't have any issues.
Questions, comments?
I don't have any issues, except you'd like a deadline on it.
Yeah, that could be one of the conditions that,
And do you have an idea of?
usually we do, prior to zoning permit, any issuance of any zoning permits that they would need to pursue with the, because there still will be some site work that they have to do and some final signage that they wish to install. So that's the nice carrot that we have to make sure that the stuff we need to get done gets done. And I have no doubt they'll be able to do it.
From a motion perspective, if we reference the memo, or do you want it specifically spelled out?
It's probably okay if you reference the memo. It's Exhibit F in the exhibit list, so you could just say if you want to say the conditions, reference on pages 6 and 7 of Exhibit F. That'd be fine. Or you can read them out. In the future, it's easier if you read them out, but in the interim, at this time, it's easier to do it the former.
All right, first thing up, divergence review. Anybody want to stab?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I would propose that these divergences, because there's two, correct, Joe?
Yes.
So that these two divergences fall under B, C, D, E, and F. B being the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the present and future inhabitants of the township, Genoa Township. C, the quality of life within Genoa Township through the protection of the total environment, the prevention of nuisances and hazards, and the provision of adequate light, air, and convenient access to property. D, the assurance of the compatibility of land uses which are either adjacent or in proximity to each other. E, the orderly development of all lands within the township to its appropriate use. And F, the most appropriate use of land to facilitate and provide adequate public and private improvements. So I would propose that both divergences fall under all five of those reasonings under which we can grant divergences.
All right, so I think we need to read at least the middle section verbatim on page 3.
So, Mr. Chair, per section 2707.07 of the zoning resolution, unless a deviation from development standards is specifically approved as a divergence, the same shall be complied with. Therefore, divergence from, number one, a divergence from section 1903.01 to allow 50-degree angle parking to be 12 feet wide as detailed in the application. Again, I would find that B, C, D, E, and F apply to that divergence. And then number two, a divergence from section 1804.04 to allow a maximum of 47.1 square feet of freestanding signage. Again, the basis for that divergence being B, C, D, E, and F listed above.
Thank you. Comments, concerns? Okay. Minor or major? Sarah, you want to take that one?
Should the, let me read the section.
Yep.
For the record. Okay. Regarding section 2710.03, should a final development plan amendment request represent a substantial departure from the intent of the original proposal, example, a major amendment, said modification or amendment shall be subject to the submission requirements and procedures set forth herein. The following shall be considered substantial departures from the original application and review. A recommendation of the zoning commission shall be subject to a final consideration by the township of trustees. A significant change in use or character of the development. B, a significant increase in overall coverage of the structure. C, an increase in the density. D, an increase in the problems of traffic circulation and public utilities. E, a significant reduction on approved open space. F, a reduction of required off-street parking and loading space. G, a reduction in required pavement widths. Or H, a reduction in the acreage of the planned development. I would like to move that this is a minor motion, and to declare that the final,
Read the whole thing. Read the motion.
okay, the commission discussed the potential motions and finding of fact, and I would find that this be a minor. Okay.
Read
Okay.
that.
For the subject final development plan amendment application, CRI Out Parcels LLC zoning case number 2022-05, including all plans and materials, a minor amendment of the final development plan per section 2710.03 of the Genoa Township zoning resolution, thus not requiring substantial action of the Board of Trustees. This motion is being made for the following reasons. There's not a substantial change in what is happening. This is an improvement to an already existing entity that has been in the community for some time.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion. I agree.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bennett? Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Leff?
Yes, motion passes. It's a minor. All right, so now we have a motion for a minor, page 6.
Mr. Chair, I would move to recommend approval of the following to the, well, I guess it wouldn't go to the Board of Trustees since it's a minor amendment, but approval of the,
Page 6.
oh, sorry,
6 middle.
there we go. I would move to approve the following, the subject final development plan amendment application, including all plans and materials which have been deemed by this commission to be minor amendments pursuant to section 2710.03, submitted by CRI Outparcels LLC to amend signage, parking, and related site configurations on approximately 1.37 acres of property located at 7447 State Route 3, currently zoned Planned Commercial District, Zoning Commission Case Number 2022-05, incorporating Exhibits A through G, and any commitments made by the applicant during this hearing, including, you want the conditions, including the 3 following conditions. Number 1, that the applicant make it clear that the digital portion of the ground sign be operated pursuant to the standards set forth in Section 1804.10 of the zoning resolution, including all subsections, which may be subsequently amended. Number 2, correct the signage bonus provisions as noted in the staff memorandum and provide sufficient proof that the site qualifies for the signage bonus provisions be provided. And number 3, that these changes or conditions be satisfied prior to the issuance of any zoning permit which needs to be obtained for previously completed yet unpermitted work, as well as prior to issuance of any zoning permits needed for improvements authorized by this development plan amendment. And then I further move to approve the following divergences from the Genoa Township zoning resolution. Number 1, divergence from section 1903.01 to allow 50-degree parking spaces to be 12 feet wide. And number 2, a divergence from section 1804.04 to allow for a maximum of 47.1 square feet of freestanding signage. And this motion to approve the subject final development plan amendment application is based on the following findings of fact and conclusions, that these amendments are to the benefit of the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the present and future inhabitants of Genoa Township. Number 2, the quality of life, or improves the quality of life, or at least maintains the quality of life within Genoa Township through the protection of the total environment, the prevention of nuisances and hazards, and the provision of adequate light, air, and convenient access to property. Number 3, the amendments also assure, and divergences also assure the compatibility of land uses which are either adjacent or in proximity to each other. These divergences also provide for the orderly development of all lands within the township or its appropriate use. And finally, it is the most appropriate use of land to facilitate and provide adequate public and private improvements. I think that's it.
Anybody got a second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bernhardt? Mr. Carter? Ms. Walsh? Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Leff?
Yes, motion passes. It is now 7:18. We are concluded. Thank you, Mr. Long, for your work on this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Time is now 7:19 PM. Daniel Bino requesting approval of the rezoning and preliminary development plan to convert and expand an existing residence for commercial use on approximately 1.209 acres at 6463 Maxtown Road, Westerville, Ohio, 43082. PIN number 317-341-050-02000. Currently zoned rural residential RR, seeking rezoning to Planned Commercial District PCD, also known as Multi-Sound Studios. Zoning case number 2022-07. Anybody speaking on this case, please rise. Think you're going to speak at all in the audience? Rise, nope, okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you, be seated. Legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on November 29th, 2022 in the Delaware Gazette, and posted at the Genoa Township Hall on November 21st, 2022. An attempt to mail notice of this hearing to property owners within 500 feet of the subject matter property was also made. The following were marked as Exhibits A through I. Exhibit A, the legal notice. Exhibit B, the affidavit of advertisement. Exhibit C, the sign-in sheet. D, the application and plans, originally received November 4th, 2022. Exhibit E, the DCRPC recommendation made on November 17th, 2022. Exhibit F, fire marshal letter dated September 9th, 2022. G, the staff technical review dated December 5, 2022 for December 12th meeting. Exhibit H, staff memo dated December 5, 2022 for December 12th meeting. And Exhibit I, all public comments received between November 4th, 2022 and December 12th, 2022. Mr. Schaefer, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I'm going to try to do my best to go through this memorandum very thoroughly, but also not rehash and repeat information to the best of my ability. So with that, I'm going to move down through the initial portion, which was just a rehashing of the legal advertisement. So what you have before you is a proposal to convert an existing residential dwelling into a commercial business, obviously Maxtown Road as noted in the legal notice. The proposal would essentially keep the existing home. The home is basically in three different sections. The middle section is like a two-story section, and then the two sides are like single-wing stories, or single-story wings, pardon me. So essentially what they would do in this conversion is build up those two single-story wings into two-story wings to match the total two-story profile of the existing house. The existing accessory building would remain, and then obviously they would have to construct a parking lot and a driveway and access onto Maxtown Road to access the site. They are proposing to utilize the access that J.C. Manny was approved for onto Maxtown Road, and that's being done in conjunction, and I think pursuant to the preference of the city of Westerville to try to cut down the amount of access points onto Maxtown Road. And then as you can see, southwest of the existing home, which is sort of the dark black rectangles there on the drawing you see on the screen, they've also reserved an area for a possible phase 2 expansion should this business go the way that they hope. And then also south of the parking lot, they've reserved some area for parking lot expansion that would also accommodate the phase 2 expansion. So that's sort of an overall high-level synopsis of the property. In terms of the surroundings, as you know, the property immediately to the east is J.C. Manny, rezoned to commercial about a year or so ago. Property to the west has been commercial for since about 2007, 2008. The properties to the north and northeast are either planned residential or rural residential zoned in nature. The rural residential property is actually sort of interesting, at least from a zoning guy's perspective, that it contains the house that was there prior to the PRD, and when the PRD came through, they didn't rezone that. They left that, they sort of carved that lot out and left it zoned RR, so it's not actually part of the PRD. So if you ever look at the map and wonder why it's sort of there and doesn't match the rest of the zoning around it, that is why. I go into more of the platting and development history of the property and the permitting history of the property. It's in the memo for the record, but I'm not going to read it through here in the meeting. So I've already noted the existing home is approximately 2,486 square feet. With all the renovations they're proposing, the additions, that would go up to 3,381 square feet. The phase 2 expansion is approximately 4,500 square feet in size. I think they're just showing it to just sort of lay their cards on their table. I'm not sure at final they'll apply for that phase 2 expansion, should we get the final, but they also didn't want to just like leave this big blank area and not at least give the commission some sort of idea of what their future intentions are. So you could almost view it as sort of like they're sort of master planning this a little bit, where they know what they initially want to do, but they do want to sort of let you know there is a bigger picture in mind, should again the business bloom or blossom in the way that they hope that it would, that there could be a future expansion down the line. How that all plays out in terms of logistics and approvals and stuff, a lot of that will depend on how if this rezoning is approved and they get the final, what they include on the final development plan. They could opt to include that second phase on the final development plan, and we could crunch through the logistics on that, or they could apply for essentially what I would just call informally phase 1 of the development on the final plan, and then just say, if we ever want to do this other thing, we know we'll have to come back and get another final development plan or a final development plan amendment at a later date to do phase 2. Probably not a discussion we need to have at this juncture, but just sort of laying it out there for you. So we can all understand how things are proceeding, or would potentially proceed, I should say. The expansion would be covered by a breezeway, and that square footage is also reflected in the numbers I gave you. The parking lot currently consists of 11 parking spaces. I already talked about the reserved parking area. We do need to have a discussion about the number of parking spaces being provided. They use the ratio of 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet from section 190425 of the resolution, which is sort of our catch-all parking ratio for any non-residential uses that aren't expressly listed in the parking code. In my assessment, this business actually falls under service business and retail. Those are their uses, or not retail, I'm sorry. Service business and office, excuse me. Those are the uses when you're looking at the use list that the proposed use seems to best fit. Hence, those are the uses out of the parking standards I'm looking at in terms of the ratios. So when you crunch those numbers up and add them together using the square footage that they've been provided, I think the site does not have quite enough parking spaces to meet those standards. So basically, we have a scenario where either the applicant will have to request a divergence to allow for less parking on the site, or they'd have to provide the additional parking. As you know, staff historically has had a preference to not overpark sites, and some of these parking standards are very old, and there's very much a movement in planning circles, as I've noted before, to try to get a control of parking and not just put in parking for the sake of parking, but rather put in the number of parking spaces that this use actually needs. So, and we often depend on the user to sort of tell us really, and to know what they really need as far as parking is concerned. So those are conversations. I'm sure the applicant will be able to speak to that portion of the proposal during their presentation time. We also can see on the plans there's a concrete sidewalk connecting the proposed parking lot to the existing building, as well as to the potential addition. Staff always likes that. It's always good to have that walkable, that route for pedestrians from the parking lot to the building, especially in a scenario like this, where the parking lot and the building are relatively far apart. Dumpster would be placed in the northwest corner of the proposed parking lot. It would be screened by a 5-foot 8-inch Trex composite fence and gate. Plan drawing A-INF notes that the proposed impervious coverage of the site is 27%. I'm not going to read the whole comment, but essentially there's some conflicting numbers on the plans and the documentation, so staff is looking for those to get cleaned up, to be consistent, get cleaned up, and I'll let the applicant speak to that discrepancy during their presentation. Regarding access and traffic, while staff acknowledges and does not dispute the shared driveway concept, we have a couple of concerns as it pertains to the proposed design. Essentially, staff is just not sure how or if the proposed access driveway tie into the J.C. Manny site, being so close to literally just a couple feet from Maxtown Road curb line, is going to function or work, or whether Westerville is going to accept it. Just visually, it looks a little awkward to me, and I feel like there could be some awkward turning movements, especially if you're like coming out of the multi-sound studios, and then you need to make a right and then make another right on the Maxtown Road, like you're almost doing like a 180 practically, and it's just some of the maneuvers and some of how this flows and works, I wasn't quite sure about, so I'd like to hear a little bit more from the applicant on whether they've had any discussions with Westerville about this configuration. Also, with this configuration, being it's so close to the road, it really eliminates the possibility of any kind of path or trail or sidewalk being constructed parallel to Maxtown Road in this location. So ideally, and I say this ideally because I'm not the one who has to draw it up and make it all work, that would be pushed further north back into the site, but I don't know with the easements that J.C. Manny put into place if that's even feasible, but I'll defer to the chairman. Okay. But, so it sounds like, maybe I won't belabor the point then, because it sounds like the applicant has some information to provide on that point, so I'll let them cover that during their presentation. Stormwater management would be provided via an above-ground detention basin located in the southeast corner of the site. This area is not otherwise being developed and is essentially functioning as designated open space. Staff believes it's not subject to the water impoundment restrictions otherwise found in section 1614 of the resolution. As far as utilities, we have letters from the water and electric companies in the application. It is assumed natural gas is already available on the site due to the existence of a dwelling on the property, but the applicant should confirm this, which I imagine they can this evening. The applicant is proposing to use the existing septic system on site instead of connecting to sanitary sewer. This makes sense as the closest sanitary lines, at least per the county GIS, are located on the northern side of Ridge Lake Court or in the northwest portion of 6319 Maxtown Road, which is Harris Automotive, which is 2 parcels to the west. Proof that this arrangement is acceptable to the public health district should be provided. The zoning code does not require commercially zoned properties to be connected to sanitary sewer. And we recently saw J.C. Manny do the same thing. Landscaping-wise, a 5.5-foot tall brick wall is being proposed along the eastern, northern, and western lot lines to screen the development from adjacent properties per the plan drawing. However, the development text refers to it as a fence. One or other should be revised for the sake of consistency to clarify whether this is a wall, a fence, or a mix of both. Approximately 15 of 56 trees would be removed from the site to construct site improvements and/or due to being dead. Most of them have calipers between 6 inches and 16 inches. Only 2 trees being removed are larger than 16 inches in caliper. Both are 48-inch caliper sycamores that will need to be removed to construct the parking lot and driveway. Approximately 41 of 56 existing trees would remain post-development, including all 9 of the trees to the north, which is the rear of the existing home, and would stand there in addition to the wall and fence I just mentioned. They range in size from 12-inch caliper to 48-inch caliper. It seems likely that the potential expansion would require the removal of 2 12-inch caliper Scotch pines located southwest of the existing home. No new plantings are being proposed. As far as lighting is concerned, 3 light fixtures are proposed for the site, one in the northeast corner of the parking lot, one in the southeast corner of the parking lot, and one along the western side of the driveway adjacent to the front lot line. Specifics regarding fixture designs, photometrics of illumination, et cetera, can be deferred until the final development plan application should the applicant wish to do so. However, this should be made clear in the materials instead of stating that the site is compliant. The applicant will also need to make clear what their intentions will be regarding any building-mounted lighting, whether it's existing or proposed. The current application does not include any materials pertaining to signage, even though the development text response to Article 18 states that the site is compliant. If the intent is for the site to have no signage or to not provide details regarding signage until the time of final development plan application, this should be stated in the development text, and again, instead of stating that the site is compliant. There are 3 divergences currently being requested. This is not inclusive of the potential parking divergence I already mentioned. Number 1, a divergence from section 120301, which requires only parcels 5 acres in size or adjacent to other parcel zone planned commercial district or under application for rezoning to planned commercial district that collectively sum 5 acres or more shall be considered for PCD zoning, is being requested. The applicant is requesting to rezone this 1.209 acre parcel that is not meeting those aforementioned conditions to PCD. Staff note, though the parcel is located immediately to the east and western zone PCD, they do not total 5 acres, so that's why the site doesn't qualify for that standard. In total, the parcels to the east and the west are only approximately 2.708 acres. And again, I think I forgot to note, all the property across Maxtown Road to the south is in the city of Westerville, and the parcels that are immediately south of this are all industrial used. I believe it's Sonova and the Cardinal Self-Storage business in Westerville. The second divergence is to section 120303.A and B, which requires that along lot lines shared with the residential or planned residential zoning district, a 75-foot undeveloped green strip planted with grass and/or landscape with the purpose of providing year-round combination of shrubs and trees be provided, as well as a visual and mechanical buffer in accordance with section 2003, 75 or more feet from said lot lines. That's the standard that they're asking relief from. What the applicant's proposing, I'm going to read through it. It's going to sound very convoluted when I read it in text form. I think as you see it on the drawings, it's going to make a lot more sense. I know it's hard to see probably at this on the TVs, but the applicant has done a really good job of drawing all the required lines and all the required setbacks and all the measurements. And you can actually see where their actual buildable area would be if we enforced all of the rules, and it's quite small. So basically, that's what's driving it. You've got existing buildings on the site. They're trying to convert the site into a commercial site, just like we saw with J.C. Manny when they were trying to do it. The parcel's just so small that it's just scrunched to the point of if we want to see anything happen onto the site other than exactly what is there, we're going to have to entertain some code relief to make that happen because it's just not possible under the PCD to meet all those standards and really almost build anything that isn't just a very small little building. So what they're proposing is a rear, AKA north green space setback of 63 feet, a side, AKA west green space setback of 6 feet, a side, AKA east green space setback of 6 feet, 75 feet from the adjacent residential parcels. 4, a front, AKA south green space setback of 25 feet. 5, a boundary around the existing house exempt from setback requirements to allow for future site improvements for items like sidewalks and ramps. as follows. 1, 10 feet from the southernmost extent of the existing roof. 2, 5 feet from the extent of the existing roof on either side of the house. And 3, 5 feet from the rear edge of the existing deck. And finally, as part of this divergence request, waiving the requirement for the visual and mechanical barrier at 75 feet or more from the lot line, and instead utilizing a proposed fence according to section 120405 along said lot lines, as well as existing trees to provide a visual barrier. Again, very hard to understand that when you try to read that all in text form, but I think visually, when you look at the drawings and you look at those setback designations, it starts to make a lot more sense of what really they're proposing. Basically, what they're trying to say is the existing house already doesn't comply with those setbacks. They need relief to those setbacks to even allow what's there. And then also they need some relief to allow for them to construct the potential phase 2 in the parking lot that's needed to go with it. So, but a lot of it is really being driven by the fact that the setbacks as applied don't work for the existing buildings that are on the site. The third divergence is the divergence for section 120801, which requires that front, side, and rear yards be designed so that no building is closer than 50 feet to any other building, and that no building shall be closer than 100 feet to any district boundary line or street right-of-way. The applicant is proposing to waive the 50-foot separation requirement as well as the 100-foot requirement, noting that the existing house and accessory storage shed are within the 100-foot setback, as well as establishing the following setbacks. And again, these are a little convoluted in writing, but they make more sense in the drawing. 1, the rear, AKA north building setback, be equal to 78 feet 3 inches, with the line of measurement being established by the extent of the existing roof. 2, that the side, AKA west building setback, equal 8 feet from the adjacent PCD property. 3, that the side, AKA east building setback, equal 85 feet from the adjacent residential parcels, the line being established by the west face of the existing garage, 8 feet from the adjacent PCD property. And 4, that the front, AKA south building setback, equal 100 feet from the property line. Just a staff note, while the setbacks I read that while they're complex, that the drawing does a better job. So I'm going to skip that note. Moving on to the staff commentary portion of the memorandum. The 2019 comprehensive plan recommends planned commercial utilization of this property in Chapter 4, Planning Area 6 recommendations, and on the comprehensive plan map, with the plan noting, quote, significant visual screening and noise barriers for the single-family homes to the north, end quote. This specific recommendation dates back to the 2008 comprehensive plan. A comparable recommendation exists in the 1999 comprehensive plan, which noted that properties on Maxtown Road will develop in a manner similar to the existing commercial industrial development within this vicinity, and states, quote, further encroachment of residential development into this area should be discouraged, end quote. So, long story short, just like with J.C. Manny, these properties converting to commercial has been sort of anticipated and planned for quite a while, over 20 years. Delaware County Regional Planning Commission review. On November 17, 2022, DCRPC recommended conditional approval of the subject application. The conditions being 1, if signage is proposed, a sign plan should be included in the submission. And 2, the applicant shall clarify whether a fence, including material or brick wall, is proposed along the perimeter of the site. 3, identify the shared access easement for PID 317-341-05003000 directly to the east, aka J.C. Manny, on the plan. DCRPC staff was generally supportive of the requested divergences, noting 1, this is a low-intensity use and the proposed screening and buffering appear to be acceptable. However, the township should determine if the existing trees are an appropriate visual barrier or if additional landscaping is needed along the northern property border. 2, the shed and home are existing buildings and no major renovations are proposed that will bring them closer to the northern property line. Staff's technical reviews attached to this memorandum. I'll get to it momentarily. Most of the proposed site improvements would occur south of the existing homes and closer to Maxtown Road, thereby minimizing any impact on the existing residents to the north of the site. Most site lighting, as well as the dumpster, have been placed on the southwest portion of the site, adjacent to property that is already zoned and used for commercial purposes. The same goes for the proposed stormwater pond in the southeast corner of the site, Staff assumes that the nature of the business requires no sound from outside the building, let alone inside the building, be heard. As such, it seems reasonable to assume that measures will be taken to prevent this from occurring. Will similarly keep noise from within the building from being heard outside. I'm going to let the applicant speak to that matter more in-depthly. Any revisions which may be required by engineering reviews conducted by Delaware County and/or the City of Westerville can be addressed as part of the required final development plan submission. Staff is not aware of any at this time. Should the application be approved, it shall only constitute approval of the rezoning request and preliminary development plan. Final development plan approval pursuant to Article 27 will have to be obtained from Genoa Township prior to construction. Such approval would also be subject to the provisions of sections 2704.18 through 2704.23 of the zoning resolution. And then also, we already spoke to sort of procedurally how this would go forward in regard to the multiple phasing of the development, and there's a couple routes that could be pursued. As far as the technical review is concerned, most of the commentary, and there's a relatively large amount compared to some others, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just is what it is. But most of those comments are just reflect the issues that I called forth in the memorandum. If you have any specific questions about anything in the technical review, though, staff is happy to dive deeper into those and answer those questions to the best of my ability. So with that, because we still have a lot to talk about, I forgot to note, on the traffic study, we can't require it because the county isn't requiring it, and the county's not requiring it because the access is into Westerville. So all the traffic matters are going to be handled by Westerville. And then from a public safety review, we didn't have any comments or either did not receive any comments or concerns, or there were no comments or concerns relative to fire, police, or maintenance. There's nothing on the record of needing to be addressed to appease any of those entities. So now with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. We'll turn it over to the applicants, name and address, and the floor is yours.
My name is Daniel Bino, I'm the applicant, 6463 Maxtown Road. That's where we're proposing the commercial rezone. Jason McGee.
Yeah. Jason McGee, I'm a designer for the architecture firm Kaiser Design Group. I prepared the drawings for Mr. Bino. We are at 800 Cross Point Road in Gahanna as our office. I'm a resident of Westerville at 389 Electric Avenue. So yeah, I think I'll just start speaking, and then I think we're here to answer questions for you. Mr. Bino bought the property because of the residential charm of the location, and he intends to keep that charm, even as we've schematically spoken about the phase 2 of the project. The intent is to keep the residential scale of the space, or of the site. I think the day after we submitted this application, we had a meeting with the city of Westerville regarding tying into the J.C. Manny access drive. So some of those comments that Joe brought up have started to be addressed with the city. They are recommending that we move the access drive north and then align it with the J.C. Manny entrance. So some of the awkwardness will be fixed as a result of that. I guess the downside of doing that is we will likely have to request a divergence from parking, because as we move that access drive to the north, we're going to be very squeezed. So we'll need to study that moving forward to see how that impacts parking, but we'll likely need to request that divergence. Are there anything else that you'd like to ask me?
Want to talk about
There's a
overall
lot.
what you're going to do, what the project is for, what are you going to do in the?
Yep.
Okay.
So basically, my wife and I, we have been running multi-sound studios for the past 20 years. Actually, more so, my wife joined into multi-sound in 2006. And we have two buildings, such building, commercial properties in Little Whitestone Village it's a suburb of, northern suburb of Queens, New York. And we're at full capacity, 50 units. There are licensed out for a musician. What we do, maybe I should start by saying that, is we facilitate a studio practice site for people in the creative field. Mostly bands, musicians, producers, directors, et cetera, et cetera. The business has started in 1978. It's been going on ever since. The original owner started with one building and expanded to a second. The original owner is no longer with us, passed away in 2017, at which point I continued the project, and we've decided to expand a little before COVID started, and we were looking at Columbus as a potential place. And we found Westerville, which we fell in love with its charm. And the research shifted from Columbus to Westerville, and that's when we came across the property. And in March of 2021, decided to purchase it after many, many phone calls with Paul. Where's Paul? That confirmed some of the thoughts that we had about proposing that. Obviously, that was just us debating whether to do it. And we thought to ourselves, even if it's not going to work out, we still have the property so much we wouldn't mind living there. And yeah, so then we started discussing this with Mr. Schaefer, and our vision came more to fruition, closer to fruition so far, when Joe confirmed that there is a possibility to do that. So here we are today, and we were looking to start, as Mr. Schaefer explained, start with the existing building, and we think that with our knowledge and expertise and experience in the field, we'll be able to utilize that, and the demand so far has been met. We ran some ads on Google, and we found that there are quite a few bands and people in the creative field that will find this suitable for their needs, and the location is good. As far as we brought up sound preservation and protection, that's something that obviously, or maybe not so obviously, is permanent, is something that we do more so for the integrity and the security and the safety of or convenience of the users, let alone the surrounding area. Needless to say, if we don't have good sound attenuation and good isolation between the rooms themselves inside the facility, we wouldn't be in business for 44 years. We always hire professional acousticians to provide us with the latest knowledge of noise separation and isolation, and we plan to do so as well with this facility, and we given the chance. And if there's anything else I forgot, then do feel free to ask.
Yeah, maybe the business model, there would be 15 to 20 rooms in the house or in the new structure, and musicians would rent these, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the musicians rent this either on a monthly basis, so an individual could rent out an entire room, and that would be essentially their space where they go to practice 24 hours a day.
Good point. So I just wanted to maybe circle this with you. I have some. Anisha? Hello? Yes. We have two things that we can share with you right now. First of all, what we do is we license out rooms to musicians, to our client. Sorry. We do not use the word rental just because it's not a rental, it's not a living space. We license a room in our facility so the musician can come and practice. They get their own private set of keys in the private room. The packages that we offer differ when we started, and that's what we're looking to do the same over here, just to gauge and to see what kind of traction we get and what kind of, if we get the business we expect to get over here. So usually what it is we'd have one major space that will utilize, that musicians can practice in, and then they have smaller rooms adjacent to that big room where they can store their equipment, and then they can rotate on a schedule that we set forth for them to practice. Again, we do that just because to see if there's enough demand, and once we have, if the demand is met, then we can actually further license existing rooms for the bands of musicians to actually have their own access, as we do in our New York facility right now. In New York, we have about 45 rooms that are licensed 24/7, and 5 rooms that are licensed on an hourly basis. And we hope that we can get to those levels over here. But if you want to view, this is our standard license agreement. If you guys want to, yeah, if you guys want to review that, those are all the terms and conditions that we expect our clients to adhere to, listen to. There are also some pictures of some of the rooms that we have, so you can see to what capacity we expect to get. Of course, there's this great attention to sound insulation and acoustic enhancement. And of course, safety and security comes first before anything. In our buildings in New York, we have 5 suppression systems that, of course, has been inspected based on the New York regulations. We're expecting a 5-year inspection of one of our properties in April this year, and we don't know what the rules are over here, but we'll find out. But we always, of course, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. I mean, safety and security of our clients, and of course, the neighbor comes first, and of course, comfort and serving the application, make sure that the musicians that license the rooms come to a professional space. And in addition to that, that's also one of the reasons why we were gravitated to the location that we bought, because we really think that the location and the charm of the place are something that we were sold on prior to purchasing, and I think that it's going to be amazing, an amazing experience for the musicians in the area, being that after we did our research, we couldn't find any such place that does the same thing.
We
So-
respect the quality of, musician.
I'm sorry. You put the microphone in front of you?
Yeah,
And I need your name as well.
and
please.
introduce yourself.
My name is Nisha Nasomchit, or Mrs. Weiner, or Mrs. Bino. So, no, it's just little add, like, we just respect of musician. We really love for them to have private room, not just in the garage or at home. Like in New York, we successful with that. We all respect like a professional. We would like them also here. Actually, my husband already said all.
Yeah,
That's
in other words,
all. We
the
love this
emphasis
place, yeah.
is to create a professional and a professional standard of accommodation for the musician. Most of the musicians, as we've started in New York, we found out that most of them were using like a garage, or they're using like, their uncle's loft just to practice. And we took that very seriously, and we created a very professional environment for them, and that's what we're looking to achieve over here as well.
Also, our multi-sound in New York is like the many generation, 2 generation already, from the father, right now hand to the son, come the multi-sound again. We love for them to have it here also, Yeah, we respect musician, we love
Yeah,
music.
we have families that have started to jam back in the 70s and 80s, and now their kids are with us for the second time. We also have a client, School of Rock, which I believe also there's a School of Rock over here in Columbus, that used to partner with us. Actually, they used to license one of our bigger rooms for their business.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to definitely have some questions for you here in a second. But,
Yep.
Public comments. Anybody in the public wishing to speak? Okay, close of public comments. Commission, questions to start off with?
So will there be one performance room or practice room, and then the rest of these are storage spaces, or?
So what we looked at doing was trying to convert the house and try to keep the existing character of the house as close as possible to what it is currently. So there would be a space in the kitchen, so a client could rent out the kitchen and use that as their practice space. So the idea would be to try to maintain that character. So then we've got between 10 and 15 spaces by using the bedrooms, dining room. We're adding on to that, the 2 wings, so there would be new rooms above that. But the idea is to try to maintain the character and the feel of the house.
And to answer directly, Mr. Welch, so it really all depends on what kind of response we get when we start. We have different packages based on price, and if we find out that will be something that will be more sought after with musicians here. In other words, if a client will tell me, well, we cannot really afford that, but we can afford like a smaller space, then we can package them in a bigger room, and then have them store their equipment in a smaller room, for a cheaper, obviously more economical, price.
I may have more questions, but go ahead.
So the use of this can be 24 hours a day. So in looking at the buffering, just my only concern is the neighbors getting headlights and lights coming in at 2 or 3, because maybe a group performs and the bar closes and then they say, let's go practice. And I'm trying to get a grasp on lighting being conveyed on other people's property at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Would you be so kind to address how you're dealing with that?
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern for sure. So what we're trying to do is create a fence around the entire property that would try to isolate that sound and definitely block out the headlights.
If I can,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, jump in.
Just before, first of all, there's not gonna be any windows in the facility. All right now, we're gonna block all the windows for sound concern. We're the way that we have it in New York, which would look to achieve over years of structurally, is have AC units that will, not a central AC unit, because that's where most of the bleed of the sound comes out externally. So we're looking to have, everything is gonna be sealed. The windows right now, we may have to build exterior of that, or just block it from inside, leave the frames of the windows intact, and then just put the jib boards with the sound attenuation insulation in between 3 such layers where the window is. So there's not going to be any light, or there's not going to be any way to actually see what's going on inside or outside. And the only frames that are going to exist are the ones for the AC vents, which are going to be as well. They're going to be caulked in, so there's not going to be any bleed coming out. And with addition to that, what Jason, Mr. McGee said as well, yes, with consideration to the rural residential in the north, we would most likely, regardless of the sound barrier being met with the structure itself, we're looking to add an additional, maybe we'll go with the brick fence externally for any additional layer, just in case if somebody will forget to leave the door open for whatever reason, which of course we're going to make sure that that's not going to happen. But in the event that even that's going to happen, we're looking to have an additional layer of sound protection for the rural residentials in the back. And with addition to that, we always have security cameras and a property manager on board, just like we have right now in New York.
I think my concern was more of lights from automobiles coming in and out,
I do that all the time.
because I'm sure you're going to buffer the sound, because that's what they're coming for. I'm just more worried about lights peering into neighbors' homes when
Sure.
people are pulling in and out.
Yeah, there's
Thank-
not going to be windows or any visibility coming
Yep.
from externally. The front is still up to debate if we're going to have we'd love to have a front office just like we have in New York, but that's going to be facing Maxtown Road. Anything that has to do with the rural residential in the north is not going to have any windows. Sorry for getting carried away.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I understand your point more. You're worried about the car lights
Car
going
light,
in. The county mentioned something, you may have mentioned this, Joe, but the 5'6" brick wall, but then some places it says fence, so which are you doing?
We would likely, I would like to lean towards a brick fence, a brick wall.
A brick wall?
Yep.
So it'd be 5'6", is that correct?
We were suggesting 6, or I was
Why
suggesting
is
6.
6
on
higher
the
is probably
drawing.
better. I mean, I think that may be the minimum by the county or something, but
Yeah.
to Mrs. Roush's point, it's the lights of people coming in at 2 in the morning. And so, did you have more questions? I didn't
No,
know.
that-
Okay.
I'd like to add to that as well, by the way. Although we do, by word, provide 24/7 access, there's very little, if any, activity happening at that time. Usually, the bands will come and they work around the schedule that we set for them. If they have to be there extra time, they do this recording this with us. And as long as, of course, they pay respect to the neighborhood and pay respect, of course, to the place where they're practicing, then that variant will exist. But other than that, there's not going to be like somebody that's going to go over there like randomly and jam in 2 o'clock in the morning. But I can understand, of course, because
If
it's
I-
written.
Yeah, go ahead with some other questions.
Yeah.
There's about 10 or 12 parking spots, I think, but you say you have 12 to 15 rooms, but there's only one band would be there at a time because there's one place to play, the rest is essentially storage rooms, is that a correct statement?
It is correct, but at the same time, we'd like to approach it with the thought that all 14 or 16 rooms.
But only one band, only one band would be there at a time?
No, multiple bands can be there.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just
Yeah,
thinking,
we'd like
wondering
to-
because we have 15 rooms and they're all occupied, it seems like that'd be an awful lot of cars. Something to think about. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, so Mr. Carter, we would like to approach this, even though we know that it's going to be most likely 2 or 3 rooms that are functional at the same time and the others will store it. We would like to obviously present that as 14 or 16, whichever, as many rooms that we can fit in that space, would be licensed out privately. We'd like to approach it that way, but I was just explaining to you what we'd like to start with. But as presented to you.
And that's just something for the future, and you've already
Of
shown
course.
a possibility of expanding the parking. I guess you would do that if, you had booming success and tons of cars there.
And with that in mind, really quick, we have 50 units in New York, and I can tell you, you can walk in there anytime, any day, and you can hear a pin drop, because usually, most of them,
Absolutely.
they would store their equipment, they'll rehearse 2 or 3 times a week.
Sure, absolutely. Mr. Schaefer, did we get any comments from the neighbors? Anybody, I know we sent stuff out.
Yeah, we did all the mailings and the notifications. I don't recall having received anything.
I noticed we didn't get any, but I did figure we probably didn't, I just wanted to ask. Oh, you didn't get anything?
Well, we sent out the mailers notifying, when we sent out the mailer, it's just the legal description. So we don't send the drawings and like a public comment form with it. It's just saying, hey, something is happening.
Right.
Here's the night it's being discussed, if you want to learn more about it.
And for the members of the audience, that public opinion comment would have been a good time, but we're not approving anything tonight, we're just talking about it, and we'll have another meeting, right? If the neighbors want to say anything,
Depends if we offer a continuance or they want to have a
or what
vote.
they want, okay, right.
We're not to
gotcha.
that point.
We're not sure, right,
Yep.
okay. The current is there a current driveway in there, already that goes straight out? So is
It's
Westerville?
on the,
I thought I saw that, but it's like,
it's this.
okay, there. Right, but they're gonna have you go next door to J.C. Manning, is that to avoid, is there a curb cut already for that property?
It's
Yeah,
Not made
yeah.
yet, it's,
right. I'm just wondering, why do we have to go next, Mr. Schaefer talked about the right-hand turn followed by a right-hand turn, is there a reason they have to join the 2 driveways together?
yeah.
Westerville?
Yeah, they want to try to minimize the number of driveway cuts on a Maxtown road with it being such a busy road, so.
Right, I understand that, but there's already a cut there, and,
You didn't have the benefit of the J.C. Manning piece, and that's when
Okay.
they came back and said that there would be limited access
Oh.
onto Maxtown Road, and they made J.C.
In the
Manning
event of.
put their entrance where they put it, so it could access the.
okay.
lane.
Because it just seemed like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, and you can see
That's
that
them deciding what.
non-residential driveway
Figured,
cuts
yeah.
are much bigger than a resident, and you can even tell on the drawing. The residential driveway is basically, I think, an old sort of gravel, single lane almost driveway, and now, non-residential, they're usually much wider. They have to accommodate two-way traffic, emergency vehicles for the aprons and whatnot.
Obviously, it's planning area 6, right?
Yes.
So there are PCDs on both sides, and I noticed it's the PID next to it, and Article 12 says, you have to have 5 acres or next to other PIDs that add up to that, but since there's a PCD, I have no objections, obviously, I don't think anybody else does, to the divergence for the acreage Just a comment.
Yeah, I think when that verbiage was originally put in, the thought process was maybe someone would buy all 3 lots and do like one master development. That's just not the way it happened, which is fine. It just
You
didn't
said that
happen
adds
way.
up to more like 4 acres?
The
not
2
four-
properties, if you have them together, I think are like 2 and some change.
Oh, 3, okay.
If you add this one in, it's maybe 3 altogether.
And it's next to PCD anyways, that's my only point. So, first of all, welcome to the community, I think that is nice. Have you thought, do you guys ever work with any of the local high school bands or music departments and offer them opportunities?
Like we said, when we had our program with School of Rock,
Yeah.
that was the closest we get to a younger audience.
In Westerville School District, and there's a
Oh.
couple other that are in Genoa Township. That I don't know if that's what you guys do or not, but it's just a thought, just in
Yes,
passing.
yep.
I think that's about all. Yeah, that's all for me.
So, just to be clear, this is just a rehearsal space, there is no recording area?
Recording as well, sure.
So the main area will be also recording area?
Yeah.
That you're talking about? Or will all these, eventually, you're trying to have multiple recording areas?
Yeah, there will be, there will be smaller spaces, and the main space will
Okay.
also have like a vocal booth partition
Okay,
where sound can be further isolated and recorded and used for recording practices, sure.
okay.
But it's within the client that licensed that particular room to take advantage of it acoustically as they see fit.
On another note, I mean, if this is 24/7, I mean, have you ever had any problems with noise in the sense? Of course, not from the building, but I can imagine if bands come and set up their stuff in the middle of the night, I mean, that's gonna make some noise.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just based on doing this for 21 years, we rarely have people that go there in the middle of the night unless they ask for permission to do so. Of course, they can do it, they can do that, they can go there anytime they want once they have a license, but that's what we expect them to tell us when they get there, and we set up schedules for that, let alone jam. They wouldn't go and jam there in the middle of the night, no.
But you can do something like, they could not load their stuff in the middle of the night? There
Yes,
is a limit.
absolutely.
Okay.
They could load stuff if they have gigs, and of course, a gig that they have to attend, and they can unload from the front. I guess that will be the south, and
So would that be possible all day, or is there a
Yeah.
limit?
yeah, as far as loading and unloading, that's, yeah. We usually, between us and the property manager that's there nearby, of course, we'd expect to know from the bands whenever they load and unload, if they have any intention to do it in a time structure, in a normal time of the day or night, if you will. Yeah,
I just seems concerning that it might be in the middle of the night, they need to have a gig late at night, and then they want to bring their stuff back. I just see that might create some noise problems, not in the building, but outside of the building.
right.
And there's a lot of residents very close to this.
Right, well, what we do is we ask the participating bands and whoever's involved in licensing a room in our building that, of course, they'll be respectful if they do, if they have an event and they want to unload in the middle of the night, we just ask them to do that and do that quietly with respect to the neighbors, of course. But none of that quote-unquote party atmosphere exists in multi-sound, I can
Do you have
assure you
like
that.
some kind of waiver they need to sign? So in that, if that would happen, that there could be some action?
Yeah,
against those
absolutely.
particular bands, or-
Absolutely. That's something we haven't actually set in the terms and conditions that we have with our bands, but we do expect them not to do things that we monitor daily, like those things that you mentioned, and also obviously using the places as a living or things
Yeah.
like that. So those are things that we do have them sign, and we do as well monitor extensively, just because of the nature of the business. And people that do not honor that, and people that do things that do not comply, not just that, but other things.
I think it might be good to actually like have maybe a document, or if you want to add
Sure.
things to it, because I mean, this is, I don't know how it is in Queens, but it might be a different situation. You might be further away from residents. I don't know what
Absolutely.
the setting there is.
We're on board with implementing anything that may be of concern in our area here.
Okay.
And of course, it's something that we always, like I said, with respect to the neighbors and respect to the township, we'll go to great lengths to make sure that is met.
Then, so you're gonna add another level onto the existing building where it's only like 1 story high. I was just wondering if any of the residents had reached out, if they were okay, because I can imagine, because the property doesn't become bigger, but it does become taller. And you kind of answered at my question. I just wanted to make sure that not at all there's going to be windows like I can see in these people's yard or
100%.
anything.
Any external portal from the building would lead to sound bleed that will travel within the building as well as externally, and that's something that we just simply can't have as a place that relies heavily on sound attenuation and isolation.
Is that like,
That will not happen.
is it like safe on a fire safety level if that all windows are closed?
As long,
There's quite a few building codes that we're going to be untangling in the next steps with this.
I can only answer in New York, as long as we have air circulation within the building and externally through the window units that we use for ACs, then it's permissible, and as long as, of course, we have insulation, which we have heavily insulation in the building for sound purposes, but also for, to prevent any water, when, let's say, the pipes get frozen, or anything like that, we're heavily insulated. So
Okay.
security and sound reinforcement are met with our building in New York and as well, hopefully here.
Is there any chance you guys are gonna plan a sign for the location?
You know, it's really fun. Yeah, of course, as a business owner, we're looking to save a buck any way we can, and if it's something that we didn't see that actually helped us with visibility in New York, we didn't think that we have a really, if you'd see the sign that we have in New York, like, there's so many people that pass by, they don't even know that there's a sound system there. It's like a sound studio there because it's a copper sign, it's smaller, it's the size of like this clock over there. And even though it says multi-sound, I mean, like most people don't even see it. Of course, with the advent of the internet and Google, most people find us online, just like as they have over here. And so, but yeah, I mean, like, we'd love to have a sign, but we'd like to do the basic things first for the community and for you guys.
Let's make sure that then the sign also applies to the code, that's all.
Oh, yes. Wait, Nisha, wanna add
Yeah,
something?
but our
Need a mic?
business really long.
Mike?
Right now, over there, how to do business, they not even look at Google sometimes. They just mouth to mouth, what they call.
Yeah, mouth to mouth.
Mouth to mouth. They just
Yeah, people know
tell
us. again,
professional, they just come to Multisound and they saw it. Yeah, like a friend and friend. You Google also, you will see also, I am the model in there. No, I mean, really professional, they come there. People tell them, like you know some band, they're gonna looking
Mouth to
for the
mouth,
place.
basically, is
And then,
another
oh, how
layer.
about Multisound right away? Yeah, and then there's a friend and friend and friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to state that, yeah, when I review this, I also think the curb cut is a little bit dangerous in my situation, in my opinion. I would also move it up like 40 feet, and you will about the same level where the other cars drive at the neighboring lot.
That's the intention.
And then, yeah, you can come out just to, because now you have kind of 4 lanes, it's kind of, that want to go out and in, so it's kind of confusing to me. Yeah, I have also no issue with the 5-acre divergence. Yeah, as long as no one, the only thing that okay, yeah, that's totally fine. For the second divergence, the 75 feet setback, so you want to make it, what was it, a 63 feet setback?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have also not per se anything against that. The only thing that for me is still is because the actual house falls into that, is make sure that the neighboring residents are fine with that, because it's a way taller building, also blocks sunlight and will make shadows in their yard, so I don't know if there is someone who has an issue against that. So what is the intention with the additional building you would like to put on there? Like, is that totally the same thing? Because you also want to make that a 3-story building, if I read that correctly?
First, we were contemplating when we started about all the options that we can utilize in the property with respect to what Genoa offers. And the subject of 3-floor came to be, and after that, we decided to scratch that just because, we'll start with one building.
Yeah.
See how business picks up, and if it does, we of course wanted to present that to you as well. If that's something that you would allow us to expand in the future, of course, if business picks up within that time. I think that Mr. Schaefer said that there, from the day that we, when we get approved, that there will be like a 3-year window to.
Yes, so should this be approved, and then we move on to final, and should the final be approved, the final approval is valid for 3 years, which means they basically have 3 years to pull a permit and do the work, at least on the initial phase. How that second phase plays out all depends on what they decide they want to put in the final development plan application. That's why it's a little nebulous right now, because it's sort of a decision that they yet have to make. They don't have to make that decision right now, so I'm not asking them to make that decision right now. If they include it all as one final development, once we issue the permit, if the permit covers the whole development, then the permit covers the whole development, and then there's terms on the zoning permits themselves also have sort of expiration dates tied to them. Otherwise, they could maybe have it approved, but then only pull a permit for one section and then for another. So there's a lot of different routes we could take this, and that's why I think they'll have to decide once they go to final exactly sort of what road they want to take. Again, knowing that if they decide not to do the phase 2 now, not get the final approval for phase 2, they could always come back and amend the development plan later, get those approval, and then apply for the permit at that point. So there's a route to get where they want to go. It's just which road do they want to take?
Well, that being said, I think, like, if you want to include this, definitely make sure that it's like under the 35 feet limit, because a 3-story building is going to be very close to that, or maybe even over. And I'm not super favorable for the location of it, because your neighbor's building, he has like a shed building, or I don't know what you call it, but it's like a barn building. And that's very close, like there's like the 50 feet setback from that, half of that building is gone. And I mean, I understand that if you want to, like, I understand you want a divergence on the existing building, but for me, for the new building, I think it's too close to the other property, the property next door, basically.
I mean, when we met with Joe pretty early in the process, and the intention was to have both of these buildings, the new building and the existing building, be part of the development. Financially, it made more sense to phase it out and make sure that this is a viable business.
Yeah.
But in the initial conversations we had with Joe, we were trying to do everything we could to stay within, to conform to all of the setbacks, and, that spot, that rectangle is kind of the only place to put a new building and also maintain all of the setbacks away. We tried to push it as far from the residential as we could.
But it could be smaller.
Could be smaller.
I'm trying to,
But if it's smaller, it doesn't address the setback issues.
Yeah, it does, because it's what is that? It's like the barn on the, what is it? On the lot the next door lot. There's a drawing of it.
are you referring to the shed?
Yeah, the
on
shed.
top of-
Yeah, if you scroll up on the
Like
PDF,
this setback I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
that's, it shows it.
yeah,
but
if you
that's
keep
a-
going
that's
up to A-INFO,
But the shed isn't-
Go up one more, Paul.
yeah. keep
One more page.
There you go.
There you go. That's the drawing that really
Bottom left.
illustrates it.
Bottom left or top?
The top drawing.
So that radius, code note number 4 is showing what a 50-foot setback would be from that existing,
From the
Accessory building,
From the neighboring
yeah.
building. And that's basically like a large part of that new proposed building that would be there.
Could be within the 50.
correct.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm just not in favor of that. That's all.
Oh, that's who's in that property now?
I
The old
think it's
asphalt
current, I
plant?
think the current tenant is Bless Construction
it's
Company, so I think they use the old house is basically just an office. And I think that building, that square there, the existing square, I think it was an old garage, and it's just sort of an accessory storage building.
The asphalt people were using it just.
They were using it for storage.
They had a couple trailers and whatnot.
The current tenant is much less intense than the prior tenant, in terms of utilization of the site. But again, it could change going forward to a different tenant.
If I may, I'd like to also add that we met with Mr. Hassey and Ms. Mandrell, and some of the neighbors also in the rural residential, and introduce ourselves, introduce the concept. So, and of course, we'd like to do anything in our means and power to get everybody comfortable with us and answer any questions that they have as well. So
So just for clarification, the properties to the north of you are not rural residential. The property you have is a rural residential, and you're asking to rezone it to planned commercial. What's above you is planned commercial, planned residential, PRD.
There is one rural residential lot. That was the outlier
The
sort
one
of,
outlier.
yeah, up there.
So
forgive me about.
that's fine, just, as we're speaking into the mic and it's, if people listen to it. All right, in the top right-hand corner. What is that box?
It's an existing deck.
Okay, because it is not on any of the overhead Google, Apple Maps, anything else. I don't see it. So that is existing that's there. You're not asking to
Correct.
add that. Okay, so this is a deck.
That's the point about the 50-foot setback too. You know, for me, it's like, that's an accessory building. It's not like, I think setbacks are more for people and windows and.
Buildings in the code.
Oh, absolutely, I agree, and it's good to bring it up without a doubt, I'm just.
Well, he was right to draw it in there, the way it is.
Yeah,
But
he
it's,
definitely did
but
correctly. No,
it
I
shows
agree.
the limitation of what the property is, so
Right,
that's fine.
exactly, but, you know, there are reasons for doing things differently sometimes.
Correct. All right, Paul, can you scroll down to AS2, please? It's with the one with the parking lot, and in the text, and what Joey talked about, it said there were 3 light posts, one in the northeast corner, one in the southeast corner, and then one on the west side of the drive. There's only one call out on your map here for a light. I think what I see from it's the southwest corner, the northeast corner, and then the west side.
Correct.
Is that correct? So
Correct.
3 lights is what we're looking for?
Correct.
Okay, and then, so we're gonna wanna see a light study with that, okay, all right, so coming forward. Mounding and separation is a concern that we've had on a number of these. You've got a space constraint, and I think especially to the north and to the northeast with backing to the homes, we need to talk about some additional screening. Normally, what we're looking for is mounding and then a series of landscape trees to offer 100% protection. Right now, from the text, I only see a 5-foot 6-inch brick wall. So I would ask you to rethink what that looks like and to make sure that we do have enough. Sarah brought up a great point earlier about the driveway and potential of having lights. While it is set back, and if you look at the sight lines, probably not directly infringing on the backyards of the other, of the neighbors, the mounding and the screening is what we normally look for. So I would,
You saying in
Ask-
addition to the 6-foot
well,
wall?
something. And normally, we're looking at mounding and we're looking at screening, which is a bunch of plantings. There is a couple huge trees back near that property line, so I think we need to look at that a little bit further. If we do stick with a brick wall, I would hope that it would go higher. Okay? To Sebastian's comment, the center of the house, it's already 2-story in the center.
The
It's a-
center is
The center, the 2
side
wings are going to
is-
go
yeah,
up
the
to
2 wings are
match.
not, yeah.
So, so thank you for the comments on the soundproofing. Is it all passive sound cancellation, or do you have active planned within the structure as well?
Passive is self-containing?
Yep.
Yeah.
So no active noise, no external speakers, nothing else? to-
No, no.
Okay.
No concerts, no events once in a while, no, none of that. Everything is internal and nothing, not even a phone line or what is it, like one of those answering phone machines that you have like running in the back, not even, nothing.
So no external mounted anything, not planning on offering up grill stations or fire pits or anything else outside for anybody to do anything?
We have a beautiful deck that we don't even use right now, so very unfortunate
Again,
because we love it.
Okay. Are you operating underneath Multi-Sound Studios across the board so that if we look you up on the web?
Absolutely.
That's what it'll be in New York and see all the information there
Absolutely.
as well? Okay.
Multi-Sound LLC 1 and 2, each one reflect one of the properties that we own.
Okay. In your agreement, you offered to show us, but it's all right, we don't need to see it. The question is, are there limitations in that licensing agreement? So, Sebastian talked earlier about people loading and unloading equipment, the number of people that they could bring in, to talk, especially since you're doing a recording studio, and sometimes there are people that want to watch musicians record. Are there limitations within the agreement you have?
They are. I'm not too sure if it states in the agreement, this is something we always verbalize to people. In the old agreement, I know that we had it, but this is not an element that ever came into play, so we may have it in this one or not, but there's definitely an emphasis on that. And again, the fine line between music and entertainment sometimes doesn't exist with certain individuals, and we only license our rooms to professionals, and people that do not fall within those guidelines do not get to stay. And we're extremely strict with that. But I'll have to review this and see if the writing is there for occupancy. I'm pretty sure that it was in some phase. This is probably the third or fourth contract that we had that we've implemented, and every time that there is something that happens, just like when we had COVID, we'd have to revise it and add things into it. But yes, to answer your question, there is a limit of 4 to 5 people in a bigger room, and in a smaller room, there'll be 1 to 2.
So I would ask that in your development text, that you specify how you're going to operate and what the expectations are, so we know what's there. And then if we ever get questions as to what's going on in the property, that's something that we've got within the office. Okay?
I have two
Absolutely.
questions.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So one is, because you're going to be very close to neighboring properties, I'm assuming you're working with fire suppression because you're not going to have normal access points as many offices or even residentials do with windows that people could get in and out of. So I'm assuming that's a point so the neighbors aren't going to be worried of if there's something happening, they might not know about it until it's too late. Is that correct?
Anything to adhere to the code of the town is what we are doing, so if that.
Okay, I'd like to see that addressed. And then the second thing was, more to Mr. Schaefer, is, so they utilized the wrong number of parking ratio. Do we have but to your point, you don't necessarily always want to have it correct according to textbook, because you could overpave an area that's really not going to be utilized.
Correct.
So is that something we need to really dive into right now, or is that something we can wait off and discuss later?
I think either they're gonna have to revise the plan to make it compliant with the code, or they're gonna have to insert a divergence request relative to the parking. And I think that's probably gonna come anyway now with the driveway having to be reconfigured further north and pinching further into that parking area. We're probably gonna have to address it one way or the other.
Okay, so we'll probably need coaching as to what is the correct number based on what
Yeah,
we're
in my
seeing.
commentary, I'm pretty sure in the memo, I directed them to the code sections that have the ratio. I didn't go through and actually do the calculations
that's
of
what I-
this is
that's
how
what I
many
was-
spaces,
okay.
but I pointed them to the ratios,
Yes.
and they can provide us the square footage breakdown per those ratios, calculate what the code says that they have to have, figure out what they're proposing, and then write.
That would be
assume
helpful.
If it's a
So if we
divergence,
do need
write
to do a
divergence.
deviation on parking, we'll know what we're deviating.
Yes, yeah.
But
Thank
there-
you.
There's also going to be an issue with the retention pond issue. So based on them pushing that up the driveway, it's going to reduce the retention pond, which will reduce the amount of parking spaces that are available. So soil and water, you'll have to have that conversation.
Oh, in terms of how the pond functions to, yeah.
Well, if we are asking for more parking spaces, that means the retention pond's got to be bigger, and the retention pond can't get any
Oh,
bigger because
yes,
the driveway's
exactly,
gotta move.
yes, I see what you're saying now, exactly. So, yes, there's a benefit too of less
Yeah,
pavement, smaller stormwater pond.
Yes,
Yep,
that'll be part of that divergence discussion when we get to
but
that.
we'll need the numbers so we know what we're
yes,
stating.
exactly, yep.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything in Joe's comments in the tech review of the 21 items that have questions that we need to discuss any further with you now?
Not that I don't believe so.
So I think also there needs to be a diversion for the sewer. I don't, is that necessary? I think so.
No, they're permitted to,
They're permitted?
to do the
Okay.
septic without a divergence.
Also, one quick question. So you also mentioned there's going to be a site manager on site all the time, or is this?
Say it again, sorry.
I think you mentioned it once that there were going to be a site manager, like someone who, and this person's also 24 hours there?
Oh, no. Business hours, which are usually, well,
But everyone can still enter, so it is a bit like hotel kind of, you have a key? kind of
not
thing?
at a hotel. It's a
Well,
language we do
I-
not use.
But I mean, you need to be able to enter, so you have a key, I mean,
They have their access to the building, and usually, yes.
Okay.
It's for the main entrance and then for their private space.
Okay.
With the exception of the bigger rooms that work on rotation with the bands that use the smaller rooms for storage.
And I forgot to mention the noise. Obviously, noise predominantly falls under the Genoa Township Police Department. They enforce the township's noise resolution, and obviously you have the standard disturbing of peace laws that I assume exist somewhere in the revised code in the state of Ohio that the police would similarly enforce. I know noise has been an issue in the past, and we've spoken ad nauseum to that issue, that we really don't have good measurable, enforceable standards regarding noise in the code right now. That's something we can take a look at, but to the same degree, noise is a very difficult item to tackle from a zoning enforcement standpoint in terms of being there when the noise is occurring. How do you measure it? How do you know your equipment that's measuring it, is accurate? Are you trained to measure it? There's so many ways that a good defense attorney could poke holes in a noise enforcement case. So that's why I've always sort of pushed the angle of the revised code really speaks more to the police enforcing those issues, and I think that's really the better route to go overall. Not to say if there's specific unique standards to this development that we want to address, we couldn't, but I always just ask when we put provisions in the development plan, we keep enforcement in mind, because sometimes things sound good on paper, they sound good in a meeting, but then when we think about, well, how are we actually going to enforce this? And it's like, well, I'm not sure we can, then sort of loses all its teeth. But with noise complaints, we generally will direct people when we get them, contact the Genoa Township Police Department, and we direct them to the noise resolution.
I'd like to add, possibly, again, just to iron out on the noise situation, for two things. First of all, in the past 44 years that we've been in Whitestone, Queens, which is a heavily condensed area. I wish we had the luxury that we have over here to have space between us and our surroundings. We don't, never, not even once, we had a noise complaint, ever. And again, maybe more so for the people that attend here. I just want to speak in length about that. Well, not in length, but just to assure you that the actual purpose of having a music building is to preserve the sound internally, not just externally, but also from one room to the next. We wouldn't be able to be in business for 44 years had we not paid close attention to that. The bands next door would not be able to practice or record, for that matter, one door next to the other. Certainly not for 44 years. So the main emphasis is really to preserve sound in the room, let alone externally. It would never, ever get to that. And I think that you can rest assured that our building will likely be the most sound insulated building in the whole area, just because that's our business. So and I know, because people hear the word music building, they think like, oh, rock and roll, concert. No, that element doesn't come into play. It's sound preservation. That's where we're not in the music business. We're facilitating for musicians, and that's where the emphasis of our workload is the construction side of things.
And also, many people, like, they try to copy us, but they not put into it like protection, the sound, whatever, not professional. They all out now. They don't have any.
Well, that's true.
Yes.
Most people, especially during COVID, they went out of business.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they went out of business, and most of these things, and again, namely professionalism, it never came into play with them, and we see that time and time again. Also in most of the trials, the hardships that we had in New York, such as 9/11 and the real estate crisis in 2008. most of these businesses folded and we actually stayed. I guess we're probably doing something good for the area and for the community.
So also,
So-
so not make it sound better or prove quicker, but just let you know the original owner, he, finished from Juilliard School. That's why he's so serious and respect the musician. And his father, the first violin in the,
It was a New York Philharmonic.
Philharmonic, the first
Mr. Max
violin.
Leonard, correct.
Yes. Just add to
We
it for
inherited the
honor.
business.
Yet another word. We want
we're
to
very
make
fortunate.
sure we have the name in the Columbus, Ohio also as well.
Well, we're in Weston.
So
Betterville,
with the-
Ohio.
With the things that are, open, I'm assuming you want to go for a continuance to the next meeting.
Yes.
So with the next meeting, our next meeting will be January the 17th. Materials would be due by,
Generally, we ask for them with 7 days after this meeting, which would be the 19th. Knowing that we pushed the meeting back a week in January than would normally be, I think, as we did with one of the other applications, we could push that back maybe another week. If that works for the applicant, I understand the holidays get involved, so let's see, that, another 7 days would be
26th.
the 26th. I
You're
think
not
our
open.
office is closed on the 26th, so it would have to be the
Be the
27th.
27th.
Which should be fine, unless the applicant wants a little bit more time, in which case we could continue it to February if you feel like you need more time to prep the materials.
We would love to, we're actually not going to be here. We're going to be back in February 13th. We're going cross-country to visit wifey's family from Thailand.
So you can't make the January meeting, is what it sounds like.
We're,
They've already got some other things on that agenda, so I'm not sure that's a problem necessarily on,
That's
I
fine.
can only speak for me, but I don't think that's a problem on my end.
You want to push it to February? Is that?
if
We
we
can
can push
talk about February 1st before we put this in stone.
Yes,
So
we
we're
do.
going to pause this for a second.
Yes.
I got to be in DC on the 13th. We know that the other hearing we heard from last time is probably, I would imagine,
Mayor Luna?
going to do that as well. Is anybody opposed to moving it a week? We would move it to
It'd have
the
to be,
21st because the 20th is President's Day. That'll be February 21st for the next meeting.
it sounds like this applicant won't be back in town until around the 13th of February, so
I'm in favor.
So
21st?
that probably works for them too.
Hang on, I got to make sure the 6 here first.
Okay, so we're saying Feb 20,
Go to Feb 21 for the
I have a
February,
conflict with the 21st,
okay?
but
Well, yeah.
I just need to check the facilities rental calendar also to make sure we don't have any renters in here that evening.
Worried about, when would you not have a conflict then?
what about the 22nd, Wednesday evening?
Ash Wednesday?
Oh,
Is that illegal?
No, but the community was upset before when we had a hearing and it was on a holiday and just trying to be respectful.
Okay.
when are you back from DC?
What about that Thursday?
I will be back on the night of the 15th. Jim, Sebastian, you got anything?
I'm only not available on the weekends. So
You're what?
I'm mostly working on the weekends. So.
Okay.
So what day, I'm sorry, what day are we looking for
Hang
right
on,
now?
so yeah, I'll be back early evening of the 15th. I could make the 15th, 16th work if we did a Wednesday or a Thursday. 22nd, you said is out. 23rd would be out for me.
15th would be better than the 16th for me.
15th? Jeff, 15th?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking. Fortunately, I don't think the window is open for hall rentals next year, so I think as terms of making sure the room is available, we're pretty much in the clear anytime in February. So what, I'm sorry, which date are we currently looking at?
Be Wednesday, February the 15th.
Wednesday, the 15th. I'm just going to double check this calendar for the whole, don't see anything, and I'm sorry, I need to just check my calendar and make sure I'm here.
Well, you'll be back the 13th?
Well, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Looks like Wednesday, the 15th would work.
Which means materials would be due the 24th or the 23rd.
January?
Yeah.
Currently, the deadline is January 17th
Yeah, I would.
for the
keep-
February 13th meeting. We're
That's
only
right.
moving it 2 days.
I would keep it the 17th then.
All right.
All right, so we're going to go to the 15th.
And I'm assuming with that, I'll just amend the 2023 schedule we had approved a month or so ago to just reflect that the meeting in February is going to be on
Do
the
you want a
15th.
motion for change for officially to?
So do we need to make a motion to move the meeting,
Um,
to make it official or not?
no, we can have that general consensus discussion at the end of the
Okay.
meeting.
That's fine. We can do that.
But I haven't advertised any of the meetings for next year yet, because I knew this was a possibility.
All right. Any other discussion before we make a motion on this one?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would move to continue the public hearing for the subject application known as Multi-Sound Studios, Zoning Commission Case Number 2022-07, until February 15th at 7 PM in the Genoa Township Hall. Additional or revised materials would be due to the Genoa Township Development and Zoning Department by January 17th at 4 PM.
I second the motion.
Discussion? Joe, roll?
Roll call, Mr. Bernard.
Yes.
Mr. Carter. Yes. Ms. Walsh. Mr. Welch.
Yeah.
Mr. Leff.
Yes, motion passes. We're continued. The time is now 8:42. Mr. Brino, thank you very much. We'll look forward to, have a great trip. We'll see you in February.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
All right, that takes us to. All right, time is now 8:42. We are on to other business, the zoning resolution and comp plan potential amendments discussion. All right. Want to start it?
Would you like me to start? Sure.
Yeah, you start.
So before you, or at least I sent to you, drafts of the amendments to the comprehensive planning and zoning resolution pursuant to the discussions we had at the last meeting. I inserted the numbers that I think there was a general consensus on to at least be the point of starting the conversation as far as the draft document is concerned. I'm happy to go through those as much or as little as you would like. You did get some public comment regarding some of this matter that I have forwarded along to you. I did want to address the fact that I know I've been saying that we're doing this quickly and easily, and that's the solution we're working towards, and perhaps I've been using those terms too flippantly. I do believe this is the proper route to go, given the directive we've been provided by the board, that this is the solution that makes sense to me. I know there was a suggestion, and I know Mr. Carter has an alternative he sent to me this afternoon that possibly he'd like to run by you. I'll let Mr. Carter speak to that. I don't want to step on your toes. So I'm just going to speak to what I did in the directive. But I did think over the multiple zoning district concept, the PRD high, middle, low. I think we did discuss that at the last meeting. Number one, I didn't move forward with that, number one, because that wasn't what we agreed to at the last meeting, so I didn't draft it up. And number two, just the concept in general, I think I spoke at the last meeting. I feel like if we were a few decades ago and we were in the infancy of our development cycle and we had a lot of land left and a lot of planning left going forward and how all of this land was going to be developed, and we were in the market for maybe doing various levels of density of development in the township, I could see the multiple PRD system making sense. I've seen other communities do it, and it does make sense in a lot of places. I don't think where we're at, though, it makes sense in this scenario. Most of our land has been developed with PRD. Those PRDs have to stay, even if we adopted a multi-PRD system. PRD as it currently exists in the code, whatever name we give, regardless of what name we decide to give it, has to stay. We can't go back and rezone any of those properties to now fit these new PRD designations we come up with. So you still would have all of these PRDs under this PRD zoning district, and then I also question, if we do PRD, heavy, high density or medium density, number one, what would those look and feel like? I believe that's beyond really the charge we were asked to deal with. And also, I think we really get into question what those numbers should be, because I think the planner in me says PRD high density we're talking about density numbers in the double digits. I know relatively speaking, high density to this community is anything above like 1.65, and there's nothing wrong with that thought process. That's a relative matter. But the planner in me says real high density, that's not what real high density is. And I don't think this community is looking for double-digit density, so I don't know why we would go through the trouble of making a PRD medium or high-density zoning district when it's not something this community is looking for, based on the feedback we're getting. So that's why I've stuck with the single PRD, because I feel like it meets the charge we've been given, and that best fits the scenario we're in. I don't feel like we should be making zoning districts I don't think we intend on using. If we are using PRD, if we are proposing a PRD medium or high, I'd really ask the question of where do we actually think we would be putting this kind of stuff? We have very little greenfield development land left, relatively speaking. So now you're talking about infill development or redevelopment land. And while some of those conversations are probably worth having on perhaps a future iteration of a comprehensive plan, I don't think, again, that was really sort of the charge we were asked to do here. I have had discussions with the board, and I think I've previously mentioned that maybe in the future, in the near future, the time is right to maybe put the old plan to bed in its entirety and start a new plan from scratch and ask some of those questions about infill and redevelopment. But I don't think we're there yet. That's not what the board has asked us to do, so that's not what I've spent my time working on. So with that said, I'm just going to present what I was asked to draft, and then the commission can obviously it's up to the commission of what direction ultimately you want to go with this. So I'll draft whatever you want me to draft. I'm just doing what I was asked to do at the last meeting because I didn't want to rock the boat too much. Now, that said, I did take the opportunity, as we always do when we go into the code, to try to tidy some things up that I saw as I was going through the code. If you recall at the last hearing, Mr. Griggs noted that this may not be a bad time to look at Article 1 of the zoning resolution, which is like, it's the foundation of really the whole code. It's your establishment language, it's your resolution that says this is why we're doing this is how we can do this is the law that says we can do this, and lays out all that groundwork. As laws change at the State House and things change and we review this thing, there's always things that we find that we need to update to keep up with the law, which I did find several of them, as well as just, I continue to find things that we could tighten up. So I did send out an email that said, okay, beyond the density numbers that I inserted, here are some other things that I generally tried to address. Now, it's a fine line when I do that because I don't want to start going too far afield and get us off track of what we're intending to do. So a lot of the changes I meant to do or that I've drafted really are just housekeeping, administrative, basic legalese, Ohio Revised Code kind of stuff. I'm not trying to fundamentally change how we do zoning or radically change anything in the code or propose anything, substantially different. I'm really just trying to make Article 1 function well and close up some loopholes and tighten up some inconsistencies. So, but I suppose I should circle back first to the comp plan. So why don't I do that? So Mr. Benson has it pulled up there. As you can see, the revisions being made to the comp plan are contained to Chapter 4, which is the recommendations, Chapter 5, which is just updating it a little bit to reflect some of the work
Quick on that.
we've done.
I'm sorry, but Chapter 1, I just noticed it was SR 20,000. We talked about making it 30,000. Is that in here?
I didn't catch that notation in Chapter 1 because that's just,
I don't know. I'm just looking at the red that just went flying, but going by here. If we can go back up to that just for a second.
I don't recall changing anything in Chapter 1. I know I changed, like, at the bottom, the date, like
No,
says TBD.
Chapter 4, planning areas. Planning
Yes.
area 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
Maybe I used the
misunderstanding
wrong
what you were
verbiage.
saying.
Yeah.
I have an issue with it.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about chapter 1, you're talking about planning area.
Stop, come back. Down one.
It's at the bottom of page 62.
Well, 61 there.
Please go up.
Oh, yeah,
Planning area
sorry,
one for me.
it's one more page.
Scroll up one more page, Paul.
62 on mine.
Right there, right there.
It says on lots of 20,000. Were we talking, I'm just asking, we talked about making SRs 30,000.
Yes.
It is revised.
No. He's correct.
Paul, we might be is that the current draft?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, that's not, that's an old draft.
I don't believe you, I'm just seeing.
That's a different draft.
Yeah, okay.
That's not the one he sent.
And I didn't get that draft, I don't think.
It's in the email. It
Oh, it's in the email. I just printed
Most
it.
recent email?
was sent
Yeah, it was-
Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah, I printed the whole thing out just to make sure I was on.
Yeah,
and-
okay, okay.
I think it should be the one I sent out last week.
Joe, are you just gonna go
Okay.
over all the changes right now?
And if you want me to, or I'll
You
proceed
wanna
however
do,
the
or-
commission wants me to.
That's a long list.
I'm not gonna go through
No,
every
no,
one.
no, no, no.
Is
We,
there-
we don't, I don't want to go through all. If you have questions about anything that he.
I definitely have
Let's-
some issues, but it's also, it also, some of these changes also are based upon how we're gonna handle this. I mean, either we do the diversions route, and we're doing the lowest number, and like what we said last week, we're going the divergence route. Every PRD will have to ask for a divergent if they wanna have a higher density number. Or, I mean, like we got the email from Bill Bird, and he also
So
mentions.
that's the resolution though.
Yeah, no,
So the
well,
resolution, we're gonna
I
have a-
agree, but there's also parts in the comprehensive plan that would change depending on how, on which choice we make.
Yeah, those are the numbers that we talked about last time.
Yeah,
that we put in.
numbers, but also text-wise, because I mean, numbers, but also text-wise, because I mean, if you have 3 different PRDs, you probably have to mention that
There's one
differently.
PRD.
But if you would do that, I'm
Okay,
just,
no, we're not gonna do that.
well, I mean, that's also what, I think that's still room for discussion if that's something, because I thought there was a valid point in that email being made that every time someone is coming to ask for a PRD, that every time there needs to be divergent on that density number.
There
And
would only
that's-
be one time they would not have to, and that is if they asked for a PRD in that.
If it's a
planning
low
area,
number.
If not, in that one planning area.
Yeah,
That,
but-
that number applies to, if they stayed underneath that number.
Yeah, but it's still not in the zoning resolution, so you still have to get it from the
It
comprehensive
is in the
plan.
zoning resolution.
No, the lowest number.
We're setting the number at the lowest number.
It's the lowest number, but from the
Correct.
moment they want higher, all the time, they'll have
Yes.
to ask for a divergence,
Yeah, unless you are asking for that specific
lowest number.
in that planning area, and then there would be no divergence.
Yeah, and the reason I wrote this other thing up was because it seemed kind of weird to ask for divergence every time. And I tried to wade through Bill Bird's thing, but I had talked to Mr. Griggs ahead of time, and he said this is what other townships have, correct, sir?
Yeah, I mean,
Other townships do have this where they put the low number in the zoning resolution, and then you look to the comprehensive plan, and nobody says the comprehensive plan is aspirational.
yeah, so it's not, I mean, most places will allow for a divergence from density. There are a couple that don't provide for divergency for density, but for the most part, most of them will always allow for a divergence.
And if that's a standard practice, then I'm fine with that, but I put this together just so I don't know if anybody else had a problem with it or not, I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I think
take a
this
look at it.
concept, I agree with Joe. I mean, I think this concept is, it would require, I mean, again, we're not opposed to doing the work, right? But I think Joe's right from where you're at as a township and what you have left to develop. I think that's a wonderful idea if you're a new township on the cusp of development. But where you're at, I would probably stick to the structure you have set up and tweaking it to make sure
And
it's
it's
what
really
you
the
want.
same thing, because
Yeah,
what I put was, you referred to the planning area, so we're still putting densities in planning areas.
yes.
That's the bottom line, and they're good to have those things, even if we are pretty well built out, we still have infills.
And it's
the
clean.
fact that there were 100, yeah, and there are 100-foot, exactly, 100-foot setbacks was huge for us. From Grace's Place, we found that out, and moving on to these other places, really did a great service to our residents. Yeah. So that's kind of why I did it that way.
But to me, the issue is your density, right? We need
Yeah.
to make sure what the administration, you guys, including the trustees, setting that level, making sure your documents are clear on what that is, and, I mean, you're off and running. I mean, that's the confusion that has.
Well, if everybody knows to refer from the zoning resolution to comp plan, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, now that we've got the tie back in there.
Right,
it's
exactly.
fine.
It's one way or the other. One way you don't have to do a divergence, the way you did, but if it's an acceptable thing to do a divergence, to go look at the comp plan, to allow them to raise theirs to what we've set up as a, that's
Yeah,
fine.
Because we've put it in the comp plan saying this is what
Yeah.
would be acceptable
Yeah.
in this area.
It's different, yeah, it's a different type of divergence.
Yes.
There's not a different name for it, but, you know, that's, I mean, it still serves the same principle. And makes it easier on the paperwork, quite frankly.
And it makes it honestly easier for me to communicate when I get the questions from people of, what is your community willing to allow? I'll say, this is what our comp plan says. You may have, the process-wise, you may have to ask for a divergence, but this is what the plan says, is gonna be the
Zoning
tolerance
resolution
level.
Directs you to that and keeps you below it if not, okay?
Yep.
Developer to justify why it should be a higher density versus us justifying why it needs to be a lower density.
Which is a much easier conversation on our end.
Much easier conversation.
I agree. So on all the maps that are in here, do we have to keep them the way they are, or can we update them?
The maps from like chapter 3.
All the different maps?
I can update any of those you want to update.
Because there's reference in there when it was built back in 1916, right, when all the maps were done. Does that pose any problems for us if we put up-to-date maps in there where there is open area, where the utilities are, where all these other things, so it is a more up-to-date representation? Or do we have an issue because of the way the language is, it would cause too many changes?
That would be my only concern is like, in a vacuum, I don't mind just updating the maps. That's an easy request to ask regional planning because they're the ones who prepped all of them and just insert them in there. That's easy. I don't know how much of the text relates to the maps to a degree. There might be like park acreage you start getting into and stuff where it's like, okay, well, we don't want to have to be updating all of that. So I guess I'd hedge on the side of caution and just say that leave them as they are. And that's why when we did the last update, we kept the 2016 comprehensive plan in the title as the main title and then just added the stamp revise. So it makes it clear, like, this is still foundationally the 2016 comp plan. We've just made some edits to it. And here's the last version, the date that we edited. So I guess that'd be my recommendation for the sake of keeping it as simple and as straightforward as possible.
I don't understand. What's an example of a map that would change if we have the same planning areas?
Sewer.
So like the population density, this is completely different now.
Oh, you mean just they need to be
Development
updated.
pattern is completely different because there's land that's been built out versus
Right,
what's
okay,
available.
got you there, but it's
So
not.
all those things would be different in today's state. So
Okay, I thought you meant because of the reassigned densities, the things that would change.
No.
okay.
Planning areas, none of that changes.
Okay.
So,
Again, doing new maps is a great idea. I think of if we do a brand new comp plan,
yeah,
going forward, but, or even if we want to do another update to this and update some of the other aspects. But I think for the purposes of what we've been asked to do, I think that's sort of opens a can of worms. We probably just assume not.
You keep that zoning map pretty close. I mean, as soon as something's approved, it seems like you update that pretty quickly
Yeah,
afterwards.
the zoning map I have to statutorily update every time there's a
okay,
rezoning.
yeah.
So that we do, but the comp plan maps, the only map I changed in this was the future land use map. Paul, if you could, sorry, I know we keep making you jump all around. Could you scroll down to that? Because I just want to maybe just show you what that new map looks like. A lot of it's the same. Basically, what all I did was, we just updated to reflect all the new parcel lines and streets and rezones that have happened since the map was last done. But I also changed the colors to, there was a lot of concern about whether the code was clear enough that SR was only really being permitted in planning area 1. So what we did is I asked regional planning to change the classification of the coloring, so you can see in planning area 1, the non-PRD residential parcels are clearly shown as suburban residential, and then in all the other planning areas that aren't planning area 6, we keep the light green rural residential color. So I think that helps further make it clear that suburban residential zoning district is only intended for planning area 1, and not for those other planning areas.
So within the red text of the comp plan, are there any questions, comments?
Yeah, the first thing actually in chapter 4, the plan recommends without sanitary sewer. You state,
Section, sorry.
it's chapter 4, page 62. So, I mean, the without sanitary sewer, you also suggested there could be SR, but in our zoning, in our zoning, we actually state that RR needs to have sewer, so I'm confused why that's there.
No, rural residential isn't
does
required.
No, not SR, sorry. It's SR that's been mentioned there. Suburban residential, and it says without sanitary sewer, so I'm kind of confused why that's there.
I don't,
You can have sanitary with or without SR.
I don't
have
think
an
so. I
opportunity.
think it states it here in the zoning resolution.
in Article 8, I'll look at that, because that may have been an oversight on my part. No, 801 is where any of that language would be. Oh, yeah, the district is applied to areas currently served by central water, central sanitary wastewater treatment plants operated by Delaware County Sanitary Engineer and by other essential services.
Yeah, so I would say that there is only RR available there without sanitary sewer and not SR.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure I ever had realized that verbiage was in there.
Probably you can just make it like planning area 2, like,
Good catch.
Well, we're gonna wanna allow SR somewhere. It exists
well, it
all
is
throughout
allowed,
planning
but
area
it is
1.
allowed if there is sewer in zoning planning area 1, because you, later on, you do mention SR, the suburban residential and point B. So it is there, it just like, it's both there and without, with and without sewer.
I think the trick is without sewer in planning area 1, a lot of those parcels are either already zoned suburban residential, or they're old RR lots that I'm not sure would meet the modern 2-acre standard. So we could always just amend the zoning I mean, we're gonna be in the zoning resolution, so if you want to fix the discrepancy, you could fix the
Why
discrepancy
don't
in
we
the
just
resolution.
why does we just not say here rural residential instead of suburban residential? I don't see why.
Right, I agree.
Oh, I see what you're saying. And just strike that, okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't,
that out.
yeah, I wasn't getting it, and just take it out of there.
Yep.
No, I don't think so, because what they're saying is SR is still an option. We're just saying you have to do it, you have to have sanitary sewer to do it, which has been the code. And Mr. Bernard's right, that is the
Is there a
code.
place in planning area 1 that doesn't have sewer? I mean, I don't know.
I'm sure there's areas where it would be difficult to get to it,
Yeah.
but I think the
Very
vast
close.
majority is developed. But
Sure, yeah.
whether or not, there could be some little gaps here and there, I don't know. But no, I see, I think you're right. If we changed,
So you're just gonna remove Part A.
Part A just needs to be the same as Part A from like the second.
yes,
planning
I see
area.
what you're saying.
Planning area 2.
So
Make it the
page-
same as planning area 2. Yep, I understand now.
Page 62, bottom,
Yep,
section A, all right.
make same as planning area 2.
Well,
You don't get a lot of SR zoning requests anyway, so. The last one we did was on
same,
Freeman.
did you just say make same as Plan Area 2?
Make same,
Make the same, because it's also
It says
rural.
both.
I mean,
you just said.
So you see how planning area 2 reads, without sanitary sewer, e.g. septic systems or an equivalent, single-family residential and/or other related compatible uses on lots of 2 acres, blah, 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 greater in the rural residential zoning district or another similar zoning district as may be amended or supplemented. That language would just become the language for planning area.
Septic system, a sanitary sewer.
It's not,
Yeah, on B, it's an A, on,
no, because I mean, it says without sanitary
Yeah, that's
sewer.
worded
so-
wrong.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble following. Could someone maybe point to the screen exactly what we're,
We're in planning area 2 here,
yes.
and it says without sanitary sewer. Okay. Septic system.
Or an equivalent.
they're defining sanitary sewer.
sanitary sewer. Or others, another similar zoning district.
I think it just states when you don't have sanitary sewer, that's a septic system, right? Because it's a little bit confusing. Is it? talking
Yeah,
about
I see what you're
sanitary
saying now.
or without sanitary
You're
sewer?
saying, in the parentheses, we're not saying another word for not having sanitary sewer.
We're saying what's acceptable.
We're saying what is acceptable, yes.
Maybe-
That's always how we've read that.
Yeah.
So do we need more
If
blatant?
you
and
have
say-
septic system or an equivalent, this is what you're permitted. You don't have sanitary sewer. That's the way you interpret that.
Yeah, and do you feel like as it's written, it reads? I know it's not the best, I didn't draft that particular verbiage, I don't think,
Yeah, I
so.
mean, we can start with septic system or equivalent, and then put no sanitary sewer.
Do we just
Or
say
I could
blat-
just
do we
put
say
lots
blatantly-
with-
Blatantly say that rural residential can have sanitary or septic, all other districts must have sanitary?
I think we can keep this formatting and just, after the EG, just put the words lots with before septic system. Lots with septic systems or,
For example, lots with septic system.
Or allowed or something?
Yeah.
yeah, so I can revise that to make that a little clearer. Because I see what you're saying now where it's actually sort of, it could be confusing. I'll probably make EG example because I'm not sure EG is exactly the correct
Yeah, that's the confusion.
You also like,
confusion there.
you also like added like the text, and zoning district, and then or another similar zoning district as may amended and or supplemented. What do you mean by that?
Just, the comprehensive plan, you need to have some flexibility with, from a planning perspective. Say in the future, we come up with some other zoning resolution that's akin to RR, but maybe it does some different things. I just wanted to make sure I didn't tie our hands too much. That verbiage gives you the flexibility that says, we could do something that, other than rural residential, as long as it meets all the other parameters of the verbiage that we've set forth. 2-acre lots, the septic parameter, all of that. So, I mean, we can take it out if you want to. I was just trying to make sure we didn't.
It's weird because like it tells you in which zoning district you're allowed to, and then it also says, oh, maybe also other similar ones, which is like, what is similar? I mean, it's so open for interpretation, in my opinion.
Well, and it's there for the commission to give you the grace that if you wanted to allow another zoning district there that we had on our code that you felt like met those standards, you would still be allowed to do that. I don't want someone to point and say, it only says rural residential, you can't ever allow anything other
So if you
here.
change your code,
Mhm.
you wouldn't have to change your comp plan.
But we can also change it if we
Yeah,
change it.
sure.
So it's kind
We
of weird how
can,
it is
but-
now, because it,
Ideally, you don't amend both documents every time you want to change your zoning code. Ideally, you change your plan, then the plan is the plan, and then you just keep making amendments to the zoning code without always having to go back and revisit the resolution.
I think if we just, if we're
The
gonna
plan.
re-amend the whole thing later, we could do it. I don't think we have any issues, but it's, I mean, it's just fact, that's true, true what you said.
it
But
just
maybe
seems
we can
vague
do
to
that
me.
another
I
day.
mean, it could be.
And again, remember, the plan isn't the legally binding document, so its interpretation and administration is ultimately the discretion of the township on how you feel like it should be administered.
Next.
I mean, if you want to take it out, take it out. I mean.
Yeah, or we can just take it out. If you think it's gonna cause too many problems, that's not gonna give me any heartburn.
No, you have the right idea. You've got to have the flexibility because you don't want to pigeonhole, so. All right, any other questions or mods?
I didn't, the numbers, and I may have given you some of the numbers before, but if we, see, planning area 1, if we did the 2.2/1, or 1.8/2.2, that's the same. Planning area 5, if we do 1.1/1.35, that's the same. If we raise areas 2 and 3 to 1.1 and 1.25, that's like a 60%, 65% rise in the amount. I just think that's a little, that's a little high for over there. for
2 and 3?
2 and 3.
Well, historically, 2 and 3 had no numbers.
Well, it had 0.75, and if they had sewer, I believe it was worded, if you don't have it, it's 0.5, if you do have it, it's 0.75. So it did have a 0.75, like planning area 4 did.
Trying to think if we ever, once upon a time, there was no numbers, PRD was not even thought as being permitted in planning areas 2 and 3. I think when we did the last revision, we put the verbiage in there about PRDs to acknowledge the fact that if sewer does come here, we want to have a plan for it.
Right, and .75
But we-
was the number.
But we didn't have specific numbers assigned to them, because the current plan in place had no
Well,
numbers.
the current one doesn't have any plans in it, but.
You talk about
The
the-
2016 original, and what had been around the township for a long, since 1999 anyways, was .75 over there.
I'm not sure that's,
And I don't have the 2016 with me, the old one.
Paul, can you go back actually one more?
0.75 and 1, is that?
2009,
Go back a folder, go back
It was 0.75.
a folder level up. No,
With sewer, with sewer.
2009.
you see the 2009 comp plan update? Can you click on that? Yep.
There's a PRD.
Can you click on 2009 comprehensive plan?
Okay, and is there an other?
And then scroll down to the planning area for recommendations.
It was
It was
not,
just not,
just
okay,
one.
yeah.
Well, it's kind of, it's just like planning area 4, which had .75, didn't have with or without conservation.
Or, I'm
just
sorry,
said
planning area
0.7.
2 and 3. Yeah, see, planning area 2 and 3's recommendation was just single-family residential uses on lots 2 acres or greater. Oh, there's the .75.
Okay.
That must have been the, is that the PRRCD reference? Oh, on, let me, there is.
It was a PRD.
That was just the sewer, that's just what the sewer service was.
Exactly.
That's
what I'm
not
saying.
what,
And it's exactly what planning area 4 had also. But the PRCCD was pretty much ignored because nobody used it and PRDs were allowed to be put in. But I'm saying the .75 was there.
well, we covered the sewer issue, I think, during one of the prior meetings. There's an aggregate number that the city and county have basically come up with. I'm sorry, I'm leaning back and I shouldn't be doing that. But it was sort of up to the jurisdictions to sort of hash out exactly how that was all going to get distributed. I'm not 100% that 0.75 is still an accurate statement.
I'm just saying in 2016, as you can see, it was there.
Well, that's 2009.
2009.
But that, to me,
Well, I can tell you, promise you that it was in 2016.
is
it was
information,
there.
that's not, but it's not under the recommendation section. That's informational, that's just background information for why the recommendation below is being made. But I don't think that was ever the enforceable zonings, or the comprehensive plans. The recommendation was just single-family residential use lots on 2 acres or greater, which to me reads no PRD whatsoever. So I don't,
No, I don't know if 2 and 3 said PRD, but it did say .75, and planning area 4 for sure said .75.
planning area 4 absolutely did. But 2 and 3, that's not how I read that. I think that's just background information that feeds the recommendation that's made below.
But I think that that .75 is not there for no reason whatsoever. If I was a resident.
I can tell you where the .75 number in my research comes from a very old outdated sewer study that says development might be feasible at a density as low as 0.75 if you do cluster and push all the houses together to remove, to reduce the amount of roads and sewer linear footage of infrastructure. Keep in mind, that study was from like 2007, 2008, that I very highly doubt would be the case today. I highly doubt, with the increase in construction costs and land values in the area, and that sewer study, I mean, it's null and void. I mean, it's been replaced 2 or 3 times since that study was done. There's a brand-new sewer study, and they don't even look at that issue that same way anymore. So candidly, I don't put a lot of stock in that number because I think it's an outdated historical
My point being
number.
is that it was in the comprehensive plan, and we did use that number. For instance, when the Benelkauser property came up, .75 was used as that's the
Correct,
one-
and if you scroll
that's
down-
the one that even with the Vinmars, when the developers came in, they acknowledged that, and there was a trade, there were swaps for different lands. They decreased the density somewhere, increased it somewhere else, and they always referred to .75.
So Paul, can you scroll down to planning area 4? Because I do believe it is there. So that's to me the difference. In planning area 4, it is a recommendation there. It's the 0.6 and the 0.75 numbers. So I understand that for planning area 4. I was just saying the plan didn't specifically recommend those numbers for 2 and 3 because those numbers don't exist in the recommendation section for 2 and 3, but they do specifically exist in the recommendation section for planning area 4.
Okay. Nonetheless, I would recommend .9/1.0 for 2 and 3, and 1.0/1.2 for 4. Because we did look at the numbers too, and we know the densities for the entire area, not PR, including PRDs, is really low in all those areas. So I think the ones that are in there right now are just a skosh on the high side and are increasing what was understood by the residents, whether, you know, they read it the correct way or not in playing areas 2, is increasing at about 65%. I get in playing area 4, maybe increasing it, making it 1.0 to 1.2, but, and that's a 60% increase, but we are giving some credence to the fact that PRDs were built there. So, that's my thoughts on the numbers. So for me, it'd
I
be,
like the numbers we put in before at this point. I thought they were pretty.
I'm also pro lower numbers.
Joe, on the, there's a, if you go to plan area 2, you've got 1 and 1.25, but within the watershed, 1.1 and 1.25. Don't we need to change the 1.1 down to 1.0? So they match.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that would be in.
1.1 and the
be in 2
1.25.
and 3,
Yep.
those subsections.
So in
The other
planning
ones
area,
the other ones all matched.
what was the number then? 1.0?
1.0, what we had talked about was 1.0 and 1.25. It was just in the
the 1.1 needs to
subset
be
for the
1.25.
watershed, it went to 1.1. We need to take that down to 1.0 so it matched.
Yep, got it. And that's why we have these discussions.
But, you know, putting playing area 4 to 1.1, 1.35 is sort of, the discussion was the planning area 4 abuts Hoover, and it was always put at a lower, and that's why it was the same, even though the wording was different, actually it was more specific, that it be 0.75, and if we're going to raise 2 and 3 to 1.1 to 1.25, I think that's what we should do in planning area 4.
Or we had originally talked about a higher number, right?
We'd, I mean,
We matched the overlay is what we did, okay.
yeah, well, yeah, it was 1.1.
We were talking about a higher number than we decided to match with the overlay.
Right, so what are we ending, let me see. Well, right now, we've got 2 and 3 at 1.0. Right
The
now,
overlay was 1.1 and 1.35. We took 2 and 3 to 1 and 1.2.
1.0 and 1.25.
So we had the same,
So why wouldn't we,
very close to the same percentage allowance. if
So
we
my
went to
only difference-
conservation versus what?
my only difference, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. My only difference would be is planning area 4 was specifically at 0.75, so why would it be any different than 2 and 3? So my only change would be to ask to come down to 1.0/1.25 for planning area 4.
I just have a hard time seeing planning area 4 the same as 2 and 3. It has sewer, it has PRD development.
Well, I disagree entirely with that. It was 0.75 before, maybe it wasn't recommended, but it certainly was what the residents.
Again, I
did.
think the 0.75, I'm sorry,
No, but I mean, that's what we're supposed to decide. I think we're deciding the numbers now.
I think planning area 4's history, though, has evolved almost the most out of any of the townships in the last 20 years. Planning area 4 was originally never shown that it was ever going to have sewer in the counties. When the county originally started planning out sewer in the 70s, when they said, this is what the system's going to be, this is what we're going to service. That section of the township, 2 areas, 2, 3, and what is now planning area 4, weren't going to be serviced. That fed a lot of the policy decisions regarding density in that area for a long time.
But let me just say this
That-
real quick. Excuse me. Okay.
Fact radically changed when the county allowed the pump station to be built that made Vinmar Farms possible. We now had sewer in an area that never was going to be sewered. In my estimation, the policy did not keep up with reality, to be blunt about it. That's why I can't put a lot of stock in the 0.6, 0.75 numbers, because I don't feel like it was keeping up with reality. You also have to keep in mind, even after the pump station was built, for years, the county was saying, yeah, we have the pump station, but it can only service Vinmar Farms. That somewhat justified the 0.65 and 0.75 numbers for years, because the assumption was, well, okay, it can service Vinmar Farms, but we're not going to get anything else, so we can keep those numbers the way it is. Right about the time I got here, there was a lot of changes at the county level and how they viewed sewer. That whole theory of we went from, when I got here, it was, there's no more capacity in planning area 4. It's going to be Vinmar Farms and Vinmar Village, and that's it. To, we might have a little bit more, but not a lot. To, there is no restriction. So that's why I'm saying the policy has not kept up with the reality. The county has changed how they view what they can handle and service in that area, and I don't feel like the .675 reflects I think it reflects a reality from the 90s that that no longer exists, to be candid with you. I'm not saying there isn't the general welfare part of that equation that we can't take into consideration. And I understand the desires that we're seeing from Planning Area 4, but just from a historical standpoint, that's my assessment, is those numbers were based on scenarios and situations and parameters that just don't exist anymore. If we want to find new reasons to justify those numbers, certainly we can have those conversations. But to just say, well, that's what the number used to be, I have a hard time making that connection, because the reasons those numbers used to be really aren't existing anymore. So to carry that forward, to use a rationale of something that no longer is the case, to me, I feel like we would at least need to come up with a different rationale. I don't know what that is, but that's just sort of how I view it.
I mean, you can still base it on your numbers.
We're not saying .65 or .75.
That's true, you are going a little
We're
higher.
not saying that.
True.
And we're being very reasonable. Vinmar Reserve is 1.14. If you go through there, they're building them just fine, and they sell for great price. It's very economically fair to builders, even though that land supposedly was bought cheaper. What that has to do with it doesn't really matter. That's not our problem. This is what we envision for our township. And if we can do it over, also we've got, Galena coming down possibly from the north. We've got Columbus for certain coming up from the east, so that same thing's going to apply over there. And we do have some here, but the fact that sewer's available doesn't necessarily drive us having to increase density. It doesn't, if somebody bought land years ago and they bring in sewer now, doesn't mean that the people that have lived here for 20, 30 years all of a sudden have to have, a 2.2 density development in their backyard. I mean, that's what we're here to decide. So when I say 1.0 to 1.25 for Planning Area 4, same thing that's in Planning Areas 2 and 3, it's 0.1 difference. That's all I'm asking for, because I think it's important. If you look at 0.75 to 1.25, for instance, that's what, 66% increase in what we previously did. So we are understanding of those numbers. We are giving credit to them. We have a development that shows that. We've got Britton Woods on the other side, which doesn't develop very fast, but it's 2 acres and it's doing, it's beautiful. It's really nice for our township. I mean, that's what we're talking about, not increasing it just because there's sewer available. And that's my point. So my only change to the whole thing would be, let's make Planning Area 4 1.0, 0.125 like the others. I think it deserves it, and it's a big increase too.
At the end of the day, it's obviously the commission's, I just provide the context, but the policy decision is really yours to recommend, so I don't want to direct the conversation too much.
How much of Planning Area 4 is in the overlay?
Pretty much all of it, because Planning Area 4 is the Hoover watershed. Well, part of it.
I mean, maybe I'm slow here, but does this conversation matter?
Yes.
Well, yeah, because the density numbers are going to go out of the Hoover overlay.
Well, there's 2 things. Hoover overlay applies, the more stringent standards apply, but also what we need to do is get this number in the zoning resolution fixed and then put densities into the planning areas, because we've been told that everything's 2.2 for the whole township now. We need to get that fixed. And the Hoover overlay has other constraints in it and fixes. And, even when they passed it, there was a potential that as this changed, maybe it would go away. But it has other good things in it for the township on top of this.
So Chip, are you saying that because most of it is fix it so it all is and it's all very similar, or are you just making the observation? No, I'm just asking.
We already did the overlay. I mean, the overlay was the overlay, and that was covering all of 4 anyway.
No, I'm trying to get what is meant. What he meant.
No,
No,
I'm trying to
that's
give you a
what I'm
straightforward
asking,
answer.
I'm trying to understand here.
From a practical standpoint, aren't the numbers the same regardless because of the overlay?
No, this is 1.0 to 1.25, small difference. I think it's 1.1 to 1.35 in the overlay.
Okay.
The overlay allows a little bit.
Okay.
For 4, allows a little bit more. We actually reduced 2 and 3 when we proposed the numbers last time.
Okay.
And I think to the point, the density, someone mentioned it, the density figure in the zoning resolution for the overlay is coming out, because we're going to defer to the PRD, the base PRD number.
That would be my,
I felt comfortable matching what the overlay was for 4 and keeping 2 and 3 less than that. Because it was already developed, we've already got enough stuff going on in 4.
I mean, the public will have an opinion on this too, so
Yeah, we have
we'll
to wait
hear
till
it
the
probably
public-
from them.
you know,
Correct, this isn't your last chance to,
No, we still have to initiate this whole thing.
so as far as putting it forward from the zoning commission, do we need to take a vote on 1.35 versus 1.25 for zoning, for planning area 4 or not?
You want to change it?
The only thing that I don't have is that 2 and 3 need to come down too, again, and that's, well, it's just gonna be an endless circle. That I feel like.
Like I said, I'm not going to be comfortable moving 2 and 3 down at this point. So you want to move it down,
Only planning area 4.
only planning area 4.
Wait,
Sebastian wants to move 2 and 3 and 4.
If 4
Jim
goes
wants to change
down, I
4.
want to move 2 and 3 down.
You want to move 2 and 3 to what?
2, 8, and 1, and
To what?
0.8 and
0.8
1. Yeah,
and
0.8 and
1.
1. This is only like if 4 also would go down, because I feel like it's a difference, because there are already so many PRDs in Zone 4. It's a very different feel than what is in 2 and 3, in my opinion. It's very different.
Agreed. I agree with that.
But,
Hang on.
go ahead. Sarah had,
You
was
want to
next.
change numbers from what we've already got proposed right now?
I mean, with the correction of the 1.0,
Yep, no, that's totally different. What Sebastian wants to do is take 2 and 3 to
Can
0.8
you
and
put
1,
this
and Jim wants to take 4 down to 1 and 125.
I can't buy into changing 2 and 3 anymore. I see the logic on trying to be uniform across with 4. I don't think it's substantial enough to do it, and my concern is with the overlay, I think it made sense to try to keep it, because I think the majority of that
Yep.
falls in the overlay.
All of 4.
2 and 3, though.
Right, but we lowered that. We went
No,
down
I'm just saying if she's comparing it, the other, who's in the overlay, 2 and 3 are in the overlay also at 1.0/1.25.
Yep.
So I would love lower density. But I don't know, I mean, how do you derive your numbers?
Well, first of all, I looked at Joe's numbers. That's where I come up with these numbers from, because the existing density that he calculated was about a half an acre, like half a house per acre. So, I mean, 0.8 is already quite a bit higher, and then the 1 is even higher. Plus, what is the chance that there's going to be a PRD there anyway for a long time? There's not going to be anything there anyway. So I don't see even.
I disagree.
You think there's going to be sewer in 2 and 3 very soon?
That's,
That's
Galena
exactly what-
finished their sewer plant. the village of Galena has a brand-new sewer plant.
Where will this be at?
Pardon me?
Where will that be at?
It's done.
No, but
they're
where
waiting
is
to
it?
eat up
Where is
land.
it? Where
So-
does it come from?
So the village of
north end,
Galena
yeah.
is going to, this
Yeah,
gray area up here,
okay.
I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly, is already annexed into the village of Galena.
Okay.
And there's 400-plus homes planned for that.
Okay.
But that's not Genoa Township, right?
No, but my point being
Yeah.
is,
So it's right
With a
next door.
quick annexation.
Well,
it
yeah,
won't
no,
be
you,
Genoa
no, you're right, you're right. But,
So-
but,
here's what I'm trying to balance, is this person or persons or whomever owns this huge tract of land sitting here,
yeah,
if we make it too low,
Yep.
they're gonna say, screw you, Genoa Township, we'll annex into the village of Galena, and
yeah.
Galena doesn't care. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they don't care, but that they're not gonna follow our zoning code at that point.
We've
And
lost all
so-
control, and yet they're still our neighbor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to strike a balance of still making it profitable for somebody who may want to develop their land and stay in the township versus saying, the heck with it, the zoning code is too restrictive, I can't financially make it worth my while to develop this land, so I'm close enough to the village of Galena, I can, it's worth for me to extend the sewer down here and annex into the village.
That makes sense.
And I,
Yeah, and Chip hit it right there. And that's something that townships face decisions all the time. And it may not be ideal, but you got to strike that balance. And I think that's an excellent point.
And I too am for low density, don't get me wrong, but the problem is, if we don't play this right, they will be our neighbor, and we will have zero control over them,
Definitely right.
and we will have been handing the keys to the kingdom elsewhere.
And I know that it irks people when I mention it, but I said this at a previous zoning meeting. This whole southern area of the township is because people, no offense to the Board of Trustees, but previous boards of trustees did not have the foresight to see what was coming and learn how to deal with it.
That is a fact.
You know, the only contiguous lands, of course, they can keep contiguing on down, I guess, or whatever. But is there something, because there are so many lands that are not contiguous and not, you know, where somebody can annex them.
The rumor is they own a couple of large tracts now in Delaware County.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't set my entire policy off of rumors of what we think the rumored property owner might do with it.
Right.
No.
They could say, plans change all the time. They could decide, whoever decides, maybe they want to do a few large estate lots and that's where they're going to live, and maybe that's what happens, and great, and then it really does make a lot of this conversation about those acres moot. They could also decide, we decide we're not going to do it. We'll either sit on it and let its value increase and sell it, or we as an investment property, or we're going to just sell it right now to developer to do something else and just make some money off of it. So like, I would never go off of what we hear someone's intentions are. I just don't think that's a sound way to
My
make
point,
policy.
Chip's point is that we're not going to raise it high enough to make a difference. I think when the time comes, we're going to have to negotiate. I mean, because if we're at, you know, acceptable 1.1, 1.35, or 1.0, 1.25, they're not going to buy either one of those, probably, and we'd have to get into a negotiation scenario.
Well, what are the
Or
numbers?
make a separate planning area up there or something crazy.
But I understand your point about negotiating, but a township has nothing to offer.
Right? Good point.
We can't offer water, we can't offer sewer, we can't offer,
Density.
Doesn't matter what we do.
That's what
as
you have
far
to
as
offer.
Well,
zoning
no,
is
it
concerned.
does matter, because it makes a difference on whether you're trying to keep someone here or whether you're writing things to drive them away. And so, you know, if you put yourself out there so that you are primed for picking, you make it very easy for the case to be to walk out of our township and be annexed
Oh,
elsewhere.
I agree. I think it's something we have to deal with. Right now, with the overlay, it's already got a pretty low density up there.
I take that back. The one thing we can offer is that we don't charge an income tax.
Yep, that's a big thing too. Yeah, that is a fact.
From a general standpoint, I mean, these minor tweaks or where I don't have an issue with. Here's my thing. The Board of Trustees adopted the overlay, and everything that we're talking about for the most part is the overlay area. And they tweaked the overlay numbers to what they wanted. I read that as telegraphing, this is what the Board of Trustees wants in the comprehensive plan. A tenth of a difference or whatever, I don't think matter, I mean, that we're reducing it a little bit less. I don't have an issue with that. But, I mean, Saba, to your point,
Yeah.
0.8, I don't know that I can get there.
Oh, no,
I
that's okay.
mean, because of the push and pull versus the village, and
Yeah.
what is the developer gonna potentially do? And I think the trustees have spoken. I mean,
I think you want to be careful not to drive.
Do we have an idea what these numbers are that they offer in Galena?
I don't, I mean, they're probably in the 2 to 3 range plus would be my guess. I know they've recently gone through some planning and zoning changes, but I haven't really kept up to date on what they've been looking at recently.
I mean, they had the fight on the
Blackhawk.
Blackhawk
Yeah.
property that then didn't go through, and then that parcel on Vans Valley just has not started yet. Whether or not that's actually been approved at a certain.
Hey, I don't know what its status is.
We obviously can continue this discussion. We have to have public comment, so if we want to leave the numbers the way they are, that's fine with me, but I would like to just point out that, you know, we have public comment, or when we get to the next discussion for, you know, planning area 4, that one minor change from what we had would be my only thing. So if we can, from my point of view, we can leave them where they are, because we're going to discuss it, and you know we've got it on record what the opinion is, and
Just for clarification, you're proposing in planning area 4, 1, and 1.25?
yes, like playing area 2 and 3.
Okay.
You want 1 and 1.25 in all of them?
And 2, 3, and 4, yes. And,
But am I being
think-
asked to
I
draft
think-
that, or is that just
I
for
think for the,
people to
I think
noodle
for
on?
the purpose right now, we continue with the way it's worded now.
I would agree.
And we can discuss that as we open it up to the overall process.
I will make some of the
Okay.
edits, I think,
There
that were
is the-
discussed, because there was good edits.
There's a couple edits on it. All right, so at this point, is there anything else from a comp plan discussion?
No.
Because I want to move into the ZR real quick.
I have just one question on the comp plan,
Comp.
and we don't necessarily need an answer, but maybe just, how do we want to handle density in the PCF zoning district? Because we talk a lot about PRDs in the overlay, but I think a lot of people forget that there are residential type uses permitted in the PCF.
Page number.
Well, it's a general question for all the playing areas, and maybe we,
What's a
if we're continuing this conversation, we don't need an answer.
Where
This is-
are, what are
So I thought-
PCFs and what are they?
The Planned Community Facilities zoning district, so that's like Genoa Baptist, Fairding Commons.
Are there many places zoned that aren't developed? Or,
No, because there's really no undeveloped PCF zoning district, but A, someone could ask for it,
okay,
and B, Genoa Baptist still has a lot of land left. So it's developed, but not fully developed. So
Yeah.
let's just, I don't know what Genoa Baptist's intentions are, but say they want to either themselves or sell off that back large portion that butts up against Worthington Gardens to a senior care center and wants to, a retirement home, or Genoa Baptist retirement home, I don't know who, it doesn't matter who's operating it.
So
You
in other
want-
words, we need to cover anything that could be a residential housing piece.
It's a residential
So
use.
piece-
Now, some of it
PCF.
is covered a little bit right now by the, and that was one of the creative things we did with the overlay, because Genoa Baptist track falls within the overlay. It fell within the 1.1, 1.3. I put specific provisions in there thinking about, I don't want to mean to pick on Genoa Baptist, but it's the one PCF district that has the highest likelihood of further developing. So I'm not picking them specifically, it's just the nature of the beast. I wanted to make sure, like, there's been a lot of concerns about density, that someone couldn't come in with a PCF retirement home. Now, granted, those type of facilities tend to have less traffic, but with a complex like, and it's not a bad complex, but you see that one at Spring and Maxtown. It's 3, 4 stories, there's a lot of units in it. Is that what you want to see here? Because currently, under the code, you could make until the overlay was put in place, you can make an argument that that was possible here. So,
So we can just refer it back to the planning areas and incorporate PCF.
well, that's why I'm saying you might want to think about putting some language in here about PCF.
Then,
Yeah.
yes, we do.
Yes.
Because
Any
What I'm
usage-
really worried about is someone finding some sort of loophole or try to work around that it's really not like a retirement care center, but the way they spin it, it is. Like, we've seen this with like hotels and apartments where the developers are getting really crafty, and I can't. Yeah, there's a developer out there who, what did they do? They're trying to pass it off as a hotel or an apartment, but it's really vice versa.
It's, it's really an apartment, but with the code, the way the code is written, it's treated as a hotel, which is a permitted use. But they're really apartments.
So they're putting apartments under the guise that it's a hotel, essentially. When we changed the definitions of multifamily and hotel a year or so ago, I had that in mind, and I tried to close some of those loopholes off, but I'm worried a similar type of loophole that we're not even thinking of right now, someone could try to exploit.
But I think if you address the density, then I think that covers it.
Yes, exactly. That's my point.
So we need to make sure that any of the density numbers apply to anything that could house people.
So you want me to cite just PCF and these standards?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Knowing that,
Yes.
like, we won't get another Faradine, because there's no way Faradine probably meets the density numbers, but that's, I don't think anyone's having any heartburn over that. I'm sorry, I think that was the only question I had really outstanding about the comp plan. The stuff changes in 5, didn't sound like gave anyone any heartburn. I was basically just updating it to reflect stuff we have done and some of the zoning actions amendments we've taken. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but that's all that was.
I was fine with everything else on the comp plan.
So aside from the typo edits and the septic clarification, the PCF, we're gonna leave it sounds like right now anyway, we're gonna leave the density numbers as currently drafted, knowing that there'll probably be further conversations on those issues for the commission to have as a policy matter. Sure, okay. I'll get that cleaned up and sent out as soon as I can.
Okay.
Moving on to the resolution. Again, I basically just put in Article 9. You got my note late last week. I decided I didn't like how that verbiage regarding density was worded. Number one, I found an error in my original draft, and number two, I just decided that how it read was really awkward. So I tried to clean it up, and Paul, I think you need to scroll up. There you go. A little bit. So there's the change. Basically, I've put in the lowest numbers that we currently have drafted in the comprehensive plan. Obviously, if we decide to lower those numbers further, those numbers will need to change. But this is that language. So it's pretty straightforward. And I think breaking it down to the items A and B, I think it just reads way easier and more natural. And then just the corresponding edit, if we go this route of granting divergences for those planning areas that allow higher, you can see, and I'm sorry, Paul, way down in Article 27, on page 27-16, section 2707.05, I added item G, which reads,
Paul's asleep, hold on.
27, what?
I'm jumping to Article 27, Paul.
Backwards here in a minute.
I just,
What?
27, page 27-16, it's section 2707.05.
Yep.
It's the standards for divergence review. Which we went through in one of the applications tonight.
2701.
There's a reference to the comp plan.
7-16,
there's a- yes.
2707. 2707. Oh,
2707.05.
G.
I think you need to go, yep, there it is, right there. So we're adding just a standard for divergence review that the divergence needs to be consistent with the recommendations of the official Genoa Township Comprehensive Plan currently in effect. And there's some other fancy verbiage in there for formality's sake. That's basically, if someone comes in planning area 1 and says, I want to do 1.6, your code only allows me to do 1.25, I'm going to ask for a divergence. We're going to ask for their justification. That's the section they should be citing. Item G says consistency with the comp plan. Your comp plan for planning area 1 says I can do up to 2, recommends up to 2.2. I want 1.6, therefore it's justified. That's how it would work. In Article 8, I just changed the number from 20,000 to 30,000 per the last directive at the last meeting. I don't think I made any other changes other than that in Article 8. And then Article 1, and I'm assuming Mr. Griggs had the opportunity to look at it too. There was stuff in the revised code we hadn't cited. There's been some changes to the law that we weren't current with. So I incorporated all of that stuff into the various parts of Article 1. And then you'll also see references to, like, I added verbiage regarding signs and swimming pools throughout. I just got worried with when we started listing itemized items that sometimes we say building and structure and sign, but I didn't want someone to make an argument that, well, a swimming pool is not a building or a structure per your definition section, hence I'm not subject to this portion of the code. So I'm just trying to eliminate any of those types of arguments and say, no. When we say building and structure, we also mean swimming pools, we also mean signs and all that other stuff. I don't know, I capitalized a couple of proper terms that have definitions that need to be capitalized. And then,
Can we start asking you questions now?
yes, please do.
Page 1-1, 10203,
Yes,
viticulture.
viticulture,
Culture.
It's grape, yeah.
it is.
Do we need
There's
to
a whole
add it?
case on it.
Do we need to add it to definitions? It's not in there.
I think it,
Or is it self-explanatory?
I think it basically falls under the revised code statute.
Can be defined by statute.
Okay,
Can I ask a question since we're in this section?
yeah, because I got another one too.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, no, you're, so we have an enormous issue on the, because I sit on the Ohio Board of Building Appeals, we have an enormous issue with wedding venues and agritourism
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, the building code, and obviously, we're dealing with the building code and the fire code, but do we need to address that, because we've got a section on agritourism in here, do we need to address people using accessory structures or outbuildings? I mean, because I can't think of, I can only think of one barn. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of barns left in the township, but using structures on property for commercial purposes under the guise of agritourism?
If it qualifies as agritourism, we're gonna have to permit it, obviously, as long as it follows all the other statutory requirements. If it's on a residential property, they're claiming agritourism, and we have evidence that it doesn't meet those standards, and is thus a commercial operation that's not permitted on a residential property, we could follow it, we could issue it as a
There's
zoning
gotta
violation.
be some connection back to the agricultural activity that's occurring on the property. So if you're, in your scenario, if you're using an accessory building, then it's no way related to the agricultural activity that's occurring on the property or promoting the culture, you know, whatever the statute uses, then that's a zoning violation.
But I have to have evidence of that fact, and that's
Correct.
the tricky part.
So
Oh, that's where the fire inspector comes in,
yeah,
because that's where usually most of these end up.
Yes, and
Cited.
there's gotta be some link there. So the one case that did come out was a barn on a farm.
Yes.
And I thought the attorney for the landowner did a terrible job. And what the court held was that's a commercial operation because simply having an event center on a farm in and of itself is not enough. There's got to be some connection to the agricultural activity that's occurring on the land, whatever that may be. Just because it's pretty is not enough. Now, you take somebody who's raising horses and has a rodeo-type riding stable, and you want to hold a equine-type wedding, that's probably enough under the statute to qualify. But you're right, they still have to meet certain building code, fire code in particular, based upon the state fire marshal's building. It's really going to be, I think it's impossible to put it down in a code. It's going to really rely upon Joe and what he feels from an enforcement standpoint, what is or isn't. And then you just got to duke it out in the court.
And usually in those situations, I work very closely with the prosecutor's office, and I say, here's the situation, this is what I got, how do you feel about it? Because ultimately, the prosecutor's office could say, that's great, you can issue a violation, but I'm not taking it to court because I don't think you got enough. So that's why when people say, well, you need to issue him a violation, I'm like, that's great, but like, it's worth the piece of paper it's written on. If I can't issue fines or citations. So unless the prosecutor's office is willing to take the case to court, it's sort of like,
What's your concern, Chip? I mean, what?
Just, since we're in this, if there's any, I mean,
It typically comes as a shock to people engaged in agritourism that when they have an event center, that they're probably going to have to install a sprinkler system.
what does, I mean,
yep. I think, so what you're saying is you're worried someone could be running it under the guise of agritourism and it not actually being.
oh, yeah.
So I guess in that case, if we get that complaint, we could investigate it, but, I mean, you're right, the fire marshal is my best friend in that situation, because I'm not gonna have the ability to go onto the property and start poking around the building, and usually what I have to rely on is something that's plainly evident that I can see from the road, or someone does something silly and like post condemning evidence on Facebook, which they do sometimes.
They do all the time.
And we've looked at Facebook before when we've looked into cases for stuff like that. So,
I just.
But
I
even
raised
if
the
it is,
issue.
they still, again, I mean, if it truly is agritourism, then as you know, they have to comply with, at a minimum, the fire code.
and the struggle zoning has with all of the ag stuff is, and I know not everyone does it this way, but this is I always take the viewpoint, I don't enforce the revised code. I enforce the Genoa Township zoning resolution. When someone comes and says, I'm doing agritourism, agriculture, I basically take their word for it because that's their right under the revised code if they're making that claim. And I'm assuming they're giving me the truth, just like I assume when someone applies for a zoning permit that what they're writing down on the piece of paper is the truth, and they're actually going to build what they say they're going to build. Unless I get clear, unless there's evidence, they either A, present me evidence that in their materials, because they don't even have to report it to me, that I think maybe something's amiss here, and maybe they don't qualify, or there's evidence actually happening that's been reported to me or documented by the fire marshal and whoever, that there's some non-ag activities and there might be some question that we need to dig deeper on. But it's really tough, and that's why I would probably go to a Peter or a prosecutor's office at that point, especially in the ag stuff, because of how tricky it is to deal with.
And if it's a toss-up, it's exempt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the courts.
Tie goes to the property owner.
Tie's gonna go to the property owner. But, yeah.
It's, trust me, I don't love it any more than you do.
102.14,
Hmm?
permanently cited manufactured, is that supposed to be manufactured instead of manufactured?
Manufactured, the D.
I'm sorry, we're 102,
102.14,
right
third
there.
word, manufactured.
102.14. Yep. Manufactured. Yep.
103.01,
Mm-hmm.
we've got purpose statement. Is there a tie back here that we want to start discussing to divergences and how we label out divergences versus, and how the overall purpose is stated? Or is that for a future revision discussion?
I think the purpose section is intended to be very, very broad and high level. I don't know if we need to get to that level of divergences. I think Article 27, that whole section that talks about divergences and their reason for being, does a pretty good job of establishing why we have them, what they are, how they operate, the justification for allowing them. I mean, we can always look at adding something, but it doesn't jump out as to me as something that needs to be in this section.
Okay, so just, I was thinking from a purpose perspective, we do name out a few things in 27. Yeah. Okay. Then directly to divergences.
And are we jumping back to Article 27?
We go to
Okay,
27
yep.
in divergences.
So Paul, we're gonna need to jump back to the divergence section again. Yep.
My question there is, when we do the reviews, I've never really, this is personal thought, I've never really enjoyed how we read off the divergence pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, it really should be asking a question, I think. We should be asking the question, does the divergence, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Does the divergence, and then, does it allow for these things? I think it's, the way it's worded is a little finicky.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be clearer if we asked that question of every single one of the 6 items.
So do you want to just change the script then? Because we can change the script. The script is copy and paste the code, but we can change the script.
Okay?
And you don't necessarily, just because we put it verbatim in the script, you don't necessarily have to I mean, a lot of times you read it, and that's fine. But it's really just there as your reference.
Okay.
You don't have to go through and read all of that verbiage sometimes like we
So
do.
are you thinking like, does will the granting of the divergence promote the public health, safety, morals in general? Is that how you want it phrased, something like that? Or
Yeah, like,
Yeah, we can,
one, does the divergence,
more like
how
the
did I have
BZA
this?
standards, I think is what he.
does the.
Like number 2, does the divergence improve or positively affect health, safety, and the general welfare, blah, 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 blah,
Or,
blah.
but, yeah.
Number 3, does the divergence impose the quality, blah,
So
blah,
like,
blah, blah,
word it
blah.
more like the Duncan Middlefield.
I
style.
think that's what
It is much user-friendly that way.
I would propose that we look at that from a question perspective.
That's more of a script.
Is it okay in the code to phrase it like a question? Sure. Okay.
So is that just a script issue then, and we don't have to worry about it?
I mean,
Yeah, I would probably treat it more as a script issue.
Okay,
yeah, we can make that change.
okay.
Yeah, but you're thinking along the lines of the questions that the BZA ask in their granting of their variances. That's a very similar format that they use.
Okay.
Yep,
But you want to frame it more like that? Yeah,
if
we
you
can
want
do
to
that.
frame it like that. I would, I
Personally,
think it's
I-
a script.
I think it's a little clunky how we've done divergence reviews at this point. Chip does a great job of going through it and identifying what ones apply. It's great, but I think it's for the public and everybody else, as we go through that, I don't think it resonates enough as to
And-
why we're doing it.
Yeah, you can always, just because I script it out a certain way, you can go off script. You can do it your own way. It's
Yeah,
just
but it-
there
but
as
it-
your
Oh, we did that
reminder.
3 times tonight already, so it's okay.
Third one's on that. But
Okay.
it is helpful if you change it, because then we actually get very familiar with it too.
Yep, I can do that.
All right, is there anything else from ZR that people have questions on or comments?
I just have one. On a PRD, dimensional requirements with conservation standards, the setbacks, minimum yard setbacks for residential, excluding multifamily dwellings, is none. And we've talked about, the distance, so is that the distance in between houses, right?
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, 909.02, C, which is page 9.8, 9-8. Because it has a caveat at the beginning, the zoning commission may, as part of the PRD with conservation development standards review process, require specific dimension requirements if they're, in their opinion, such requirements are in the best interest of the health and welfare of the general township. So it says none, in my little thing that I rewrote here, I just put in some things I think were better, because if you're non-conservation, it's 20 feet between houses. But for with conservation, there's none. I mean, and they've added, usually it's 12, and maybe that's written somewhere, and I might be missing that. 909.02,
So,
minimum yard setback requirements, residential.
couple thoughts there. I have never loved the verbiage of 90902A. I think it's too unpredictable and arbitrary. I never like a standard when it reads, the zoning commission can essentially do whatever it wants. That's never a good standard. And I hear Pete laughing, so I'm assuming he agrees. If it was up to me, I would strike that.
Okay,
I feel like I think that is a bridge too far.
I agree with that. But with the minimum yard setback at none, we kind of need to do something, because,
I
you know, because we've had this 12-foot thing, seems to be what these guys end up, probably with the size of the lot, 60 by 120, I think it is. And when they build the house, that's what they end up with.
I'll explain I don't have a number for you to put in mind, but I'll explain the theory of why it's the way it is.
Okay, but let me just finish one thing.
Sure.
The PRDs that are built, and this is part of the PRDs that are built in different planning areas, it's like if you build a PRD in a planning area with 2, 3, or 4 perhaps, maybe you want a wider margin in between houses, and maybe we should set that out. Maybe it should be 30 feet, for instance, just throwing it out. Because like over in planning area 5, it's been whatever they come up with, and most PRDs is whatever you come up with. But they already have such a low density, they can spread their lots out, and they can spread their houses out a little bit and give more room between houses, but we don't have any number whatsoever. So go ahead, Joe, sorry.
So the theory being why the setbacks are flexible because it's part of the trade back and forth that you get into with these regulations. We're gonna allow you higher density and more flexibility in your setbacks, the trade being you're giving us 10% more of your land that you're not gonna be able to make money on because you're giving it to us as open space. It's part of that back and forth.
Right.
And it also was a way to force, historically, a lot of these cluster condo developments into doing conservation development standards because they couldn't meet the setback regulations
Right.
without conservation. So it always pushed them into with conservation. So although they were allowed to do higher density, it made sense because they were doing the condos and we're generally doing higher density anyway. We still were getting 10%, it was our way to get our 10% more open space to compensate for the fact we were getting higher density. But it provides that flexibility. It's that carrot because a developer may say, I really need that setback flexibility. I'm not even that concerned about density, but I really need I can't do the setbacks they want me to do. Oh, but over here they let me do, it's a lot more flexible. I can sort of do what I want. I'm going to do with conservation development standards and give them more of that 10% open space. So it's that win-win type of philosophy. I'm not so concerned about the fire code because the fire code is the fire code. Whatever we approve is moot. We could approve 3
Is
feet,
12
but if
feet?
fire code says 12 feet, it's going to be 12 feet. Because they can't build it and not meet building and fire code.
I mean, that's something that we don't know when we read that, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't know if we should put a minimum in there anyway, because what's an interesting thing is, with the latest Mira Luna, they tried to go non-conservation and get, divergences to smaller lot sizes and less room in between houses. So, which was interesting, which kind of made me think about that, if you're putting something in one of the more rural areas, yeah, okay, you can do a PRD, but, what a lot of the residents complained about was the houses being so close together. And, other people have mentioned that too.
Yeah, it's just difficult to, again, it's just like the density issue. You can't, it's hard to say, well, setbacks in this area, we're okay with this, but in this area, we're okay with this. And that's, I guess you could put in your comp plan. It's a level of detail, I think that's a little too much for a comp plan, though.
I personally like the flexibility of not having a standard in there.
Okay? Okay.
Do you have an issue with the discretion that the zoning commission has to?
That's,
good
well,
point.
no, I mean, I think you need to,
Yeah, if we're
I
not gonna
agree with
change
Joe, that
one, we need to keep
language,
one.
you want to take out opinion, right? I mean, but, that goes back to kind of your purpose section, what David was saying earlier. I mean, general welfare can mean pretty much whatever you want it to mean. And every PD is different. It's based upon, all kinds of things. It could be based upon topography. I mean, it could be, so I'd rather have you guys have the flexibility to make that determination, as opposed to setting something in there and then have everybody request divergences from it.
Will that keep people from, let's say we decide, like for EPCON, we said, well, for this area, we think we should have these, this distance or something like that. I mean, can we get sued over it? We decided we want it different than the one next to it or something, for instance, for some good reason?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have a rational reason for wanting to do it, absolutely, you can do it.
Okay.
I mean, that's why planned developments, that's why everybody does them. It's the flexibility.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, if you have a rational reason why you're varying your setbacks,
Okay.
by all means, they're not gonna win that case. They may sue you, right? But, if push comes to shove and everybody goes to the mat on it, they're not gonna win that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good knowledge, yeah.
So am I hearing on 909.02.a, we want to just keep it, but take out the reference to opinion,
Yeah,
but keep the rest of that verbiage?
yes.
Okay. That's the attorney's recommendation. Is the commission on board with that?
Good with that, because we're still going to have our opinion, whether it says or not, because we'll say if the requirements are in the best interest of the health and welfare.
Yep.
Well, and that's what the statute says. That's what
Yeah, and
that's the
so that's
basis of zoning.
Taking the word
So-
out of there, taking out
Yeah.
your opinion
Take out your
is fine,
opinion,
It's a few
because
more words than just that.
nobody can go
opinion.
back and just give
It's
us
that little
trouble for
stretch,
that.
isn't it?
Yeah, I think I can cross out if in their opinion such requirements and just replace that with the word that.
Yeah.
Yes. Probably better.
With setbacks, the reason I did this thing the way I did it was because then you had defined areas, and you could put different setbacks in the areas. And the word heavy is relative to only our township, it's not relative to New York City, It's
Certainly.
just ours.
Yep.
And I don't care, we can call them whatever names we want to use, but this gave us the ability to put setbacks in, but if we want to stay, just flexible, but we'll, as a commission can say, hey, doesn't work there, we want bigger setbacks.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that
Something to deal with.
discretion and flexibility I think we were talking to.
Yeah, and if you put minimum in, then everybody's gonna come in at the minimum.
Yep.
Sure.
What we talked about tonight is just general updates. The date on the screen will not matter, correct? In your opinion? The draft document, as we talk about the initiation.
Oh, are you thinking about initiating tonight?
Set a public hearing.
I think we are.
With the general
Um,
updates?
I
or
guess
do
that's
you-
my that's a question I have for
Everything we
Pete.
want to present to the public.
The document they initiate, if they initiate, do they need to specify all those changes they just talked about?
Yeah.
So do you want to go
Probably.
through in your initiation motion, relist all the changes you just made, or do you want me to
No.
make the changes and bring it
No,
back
so
to you in
want
January?
You want a clean document.
Yeah,
You
I
want to
want a clean
initiate a
document.
clean document.
That was my question,
Yeah.
is what we talked about tonight just general update, or do we need a clean copy to make the initiation?
I think it's the latter.
Yes.
Okay, I agree with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe,
A special short meeting in between, just to come in and say, yep, that's it. mean, just keep the process.
Or what I can do, how I've handled it in the past is I've drafted something and I can sit down with the chair and he can make sure like Joe got it right and didn't make any stupid typos,
Okay,
before I send it out to everyone for review. And I can send it to Pete too for that same type of review.
okay. Oh, so then we'd all, that,
This is before the next meeting, which is the 17th. We have,
Right, it depends on when you want to hold your first,
Christmas, yeah.
when you want to hold your first hearing. That's
Okay,
the
that's fine with me. The January meeting, I know we rescheduled already, but I'm not going to be here for that.
Okay.
And I know Mary Luna's coming back in. I don't know if they'll be, where they'll be on that, but any chance you'd want to schedule for the 24th? Or how, is that getting too close? I mean, we've moved February back.
I don't think we can move it at this point because you've given them their date.
we gave them another date.
Okay,
Nuts.
yeah.
You got some reading and watching to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Otherwise, I'd consider it, but it was already on the record. We can't change it on them.
Yeah.
Wait, the 16th meeting is moved to the,
16th, no, we have it on the 17th.
yeah, that's why,
January 17th is,
yeah, that's
is
why I think, that's why I want to make sure.
Or they
it's
wanted
not
to
on the
initiate on the 17th.
16th is a holiday. Yeah, that's fine. Before, because of the national championship game, and some of us are out of town as well. All right, everybody good? So you've got,
yeah, I made all the notes about all the stuff you want to see. And then obviously, if you get the initiated copy in January, and you vote to initiate, you can, again, as part of your initiation motion, if there's any further changes you want to make and not want to wait another month, you can make those changes then. And then when we get into the public hearing, you're still going to have the opportunity to
Exactly.
make further revisions to the document.
so I would anticipate we initiate it on that date. We'll need to look at other dates then for probably a special
I think
on
just.
this.
I think so.
A separate meeting in
Yeah,
February.
you don't want to, yeah, you don't, with all of your applications,
We've
you
already
wanna
moved the February one.
give it its own
Now
light.
it's the 15th. We'll talk about it that night and then reach out to you with dates before we
Okay.
set something.
Yeah, if you have any, Mr. Carter, if you have any dates in February that you know don't work for you, maybe you could communicate them
I'm
to
doing
me.
all February.
Okay,
And after the 20, I get back the 21st of January.
Okay, so last week of January into February, you're fine.
I'm good.
if we initiate on the 17th, we're not having that meeting until probably,
No, because we need what, we've got to post it, we need at
gotta
least
post it,
30
advertising, it's probably gonna be almost a month.
It's got, does it have to be a 30-day window before we can have the discussion?
20 to 40 days, and with us being our own applicant, even I think the 40 is a little,
So 20 to
Wiggle
40,
room.
so once we initiate, we have 20 to 40 to hold the public.
to hold the hearing. Now, the hearing can go as many meetings as you want, but you have to
We
open the
have to
hearing
start.
within
Get
24.
20 to 40.
I can plot all that out, yep.
So we'll double check with you on dates, just to make
Yeah.
everybody's, Joe will handle that, so we're not having sunshine law discussions.
Right.
Okay. We've got 2023 meeting schedule changes, so we've changed the February meeting.
So is there a general consensus that you just want me to change the schedule to reflect the change you made from
Please
February?
change, yes. And then for the following January meeting of 24, we might as well change it now too.
Well, I think we did, we have it on the 16th.
Did we? I thought we left it, did we already change it?
I have it on, yeah, I have the adopted copy I made, I have it scheduled on January 16th.
What? We're talking 24 already?
Good Lord.
So I think after we had that discussion, Mr. Leff, I went back and looked at it, I think we're okay there.
Okay, then I just did not change it on my calendar. It would now be the 16th of 24?
Yep,
Okay. And you're gonna change, we already changed this January, we're gonna change February, and we're good from there.
yep.
Okay?
I'll correct it, I'll post it, and then I will advertise all the meeting dates for the entire year, at the beginning of the year.
Okay. Public comment?
Mr. Chairman, Carl Gebhardt, 6796 Regency Drive. I had some comments, but due to the hour and my respect for you folks, I'd just like to make a comment on a statement that Pete Grigg just made. By the way, it's good to see you back. I understand you were almost on waivers, so I hope your fees are a lot higher than they were. he used the term rational reason. He just used it 5 minutes ago. I think that's lacking in some of the directions we're heading right now, is rational reasoning. And I would encourage everyone, sit down, take a look at what's been done, and say, how can we rationally justify this to developers, to our residents, to the courts, to whomever? I'll have some more to comment on in the future, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir? Close that. Our next meeting is January the 16th, here in the hall. Are
No,
there any
January
other-
17th.
Sorry, January 17th. Sorry, this is, date was wrong on the script. I read it wrong. Jeez. Anything else for the good of the order, discussion, open items? Joe, anything else coming down the pipeline that we need to?
We did actually receive a final development plan amendment application today for your January agenda. So your January agenda currently is looking like it's going to be the continued here for Mira Luna. And then the final development plan amendment application is for the Nook Highland Lakes, formerly known as the Nesta Highland Lakes, formerly known as Hawkins Nesta Highland Lakes, depending on what year we're talking about. It predominantly just has to do with some arrangement of the open space. You'll see it when, I'm not sure we have the copies quite ready, but we'll email it out. It just came in today. But those are the two items on your agenda, plus the continued conversation we have from this evening on the amendments.
And then, so the date's already passed, right, for submission?
Yeah, yes, because the amendment submission date was today.
Today.
So anything would have had to come in for January today. Rezoning deadline already passed for today as well. Or I'm sorry, I have it as the 19th.
I'll move,
Actually, so we have another week for amendments to come in.
I'll move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
The time is now 10:12. Meeting is adjourned.